3 days before Christmas in 2022, while Denver's streets sparkled under a blanket of snow and soft jazz renditions of holiday classics drifted from passing cars, my world quietly unraveled with one phone call. I had just stepped into my one-bedroom apartment near Capitol Hill, exhausted from another double shift at the community clinic. My fingers were numb, my breath still fogging from the icy wind. I kicked off my boots, peeled off my navy scrubs, and sighed at the sight of the small suitcase by the door. Already packed, a pine green scarf was folded on top, and a handful of carefully wrapped gifts, each one thoughtful, intentional, waited patiently beside it like silent offerings. I'd remembered the nutmeg. I'd even tracked down the exact toffee my aunt swore by. I had done everything right again, hoping this year I'd be enough. When my phone buzzed and Julian lit up on the screen, my older brother, I answered with an automatic smile. "Hey, Jules." But his tone wasn't warm, it was careful. "Hey, Lena. So, just a heads up. Marina's coming to Christmas this year." I paused. His new girlfriend, the one who practiced sound healing and once saged the living room because I mentioned I worked in palliative care. "She's really big on emotional alignment," he continued. "And the energy you carry from the clinic, it's just kind of a lot for her, so we thought maybe for this year you could just take a break. You understand, right? Nothing personal." I stared at the blinking lights on my thrift store tree suddenly dimmed. Nothing personal. Before I could respond, my mother called. Her voice was sugar-coated steel. "Sweetheart, we just want peace. You know how sensitive Marina is. If you come, it could make things awkward. Honestly, if you show up, we may not open the door." No lies, no sugar-coated omissions, just rejection delivered with a bout. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I didn't beg to be included. I just stood there, phone in hand, looking at the little gifts I'd wrapped with trembling hope for people who had never made space for me. People who only noticed my absence when it inconvenienced their comfort. And this year, finally, I let that silence speak for me. I moved slowly, deliberately, like someone folding up the last chairs after an invisible funeral. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The automatic transfer to cover my parents' overdue property tax canceled. The quiet monthly deposit into Julian's startup fund locked. The car insurance plan I had co-signed for Dad last year terminated. I wasn't angry, just done. For so long, I'd believed that if I gave enough, stayed useful enough, kept showing up with casseroles and calmness, I'd earn a seat at the table. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. I thought being dependable made me indispensable. But in that warm silence, surrounded by cinnamon-scented air and the low hum of my old radiator, the truth settled like snow. I was never celebrated. I was simply allowed until I wasn't. Outside my window, the first flakes began to fall, soft and certain, muffling the city in white hush. I stared through the glass and felt something surprising. Relief. No more effort to fit in. No more asking, shrinking, tiptoeing. No more asking to be let in. This Christmas, I wouldn't be the outsider pressing her face to the window. I wouldn't be the almost enough. They only remembered when something needed fixing. I used to think this was normal. How some kids got spotlight and softness while others were expected to function like furniture. Steady, supportive, and silent. I was the oldest. The practice run, as my dad liked to say at cookouts. The test child, the one who had to earn affection through usefulness. Meanwhile, Julian, 5 years younger, was the miracle baby, the charmer, the dreamer. When he skipped rent to fund his band's third album attempt, it was ambition. When I took an extra shift at the hospital, I was overdoing it again. I remembered when he spray-painted abstract shapes across the garage wall at 15. My parents called it passion art. They laughed. I dropped a casserole dish 2 days later and got a lecture on carelessness. Once in high school, I filled out a FAFSA application and left it on the counter for Mom to sign. I even highlighted where she never asked about it. When my med school acceptance arrived, I brought it home like a trophy. She glanced at it and muttered, "That's intense. Just don't lose yourself in it." Then she turned back to chopping celery. And when Julian dropped out of school for the third time to launch a healing podcast, they hosted a welcome back dinner with candles and wine. There had been balloons, cake, even a framed photo of Julian clutching a paintbrush still hanging in the front hallway like it was a sacred relic. The same house that had never thrown me a single graduation party seemed to vibrate with pride for the son who hadn't held a steady job in years. I once found one of my old sketchbooks there, half filled with doodles from hospital breaks, scribbled scenes of Denver sunsets and patients' hands mid-recovery, tossed in the recycling bin beneath takeout menus and expired coupons. When I asked about it, they shrugged, laughed, said they thought it was scrap paper. Maybe it was to them. Maybe I was too. Still, I kept showing up through med school, through residency, through the graveyard shifts spent in quiet rooms where most doctors didn't linger. Rooms filled with fading photos, wisp regrets, and the ache of being left behind. That's why I chose geriatrics. I saw myself in those long-forgotten spaces. People who had poured out their lives and were now only noticed when things broke. At home, my role never shifted. I was the calm one, the helper, the invisible hand keeping the cracks from spreading. When the roof started leaking after a snowstorm, and the insurance denied the claim, I paid for it quietly. When Julian's freelance work dried up again, I transferred money without asking questions. When my mom's hip started locking again and her physical therapist stopped coming due to missed payments, I called, scheduled, covered, coordinated because I loved them or because I still believed that love was something transactional, something you earn through sacrifice. They never said thank you. They didn't need to. In their world, love wasn't spoken aloud. It was assumed, expected, like gravity or daylight. And every time I handed over a piece of myself, they took it. Not maliciously, just blindly. Never once asking what it cost me. For years, I thought that's what family meant. Being unseen, but indispensable, like scaffolding, essential, but never the focus. But that night, after the calls telling me I wasn't welcome at Christmas, something in me snapped. I realized scaffolding isn't meant to bleed for the building it holds up. I was done watching my life shrink to make theirs more comfortable. If this story resonates with you, even just a little, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come. And trust me, the next part, that's when everything changes. When Julian impulsively bought a new set of vintage lenses for his documentary project and couldn't afford his Thanksgiving flight home, I bought his ticket again. He hugged me at the gate, called me the best sister in the universe, and by the following week, it was forgotten. Just another favor folded neatly into the invisible ledger I was never supposed to acknowledge. No one had to ask. I was always one step ahead like some ghost in the background machinery of their lives. Fixing, covering, smoothing quietly. Never seen but always necessary. They never said thank you. Maybe because gratitude makes it harder to keep leaning on someone without pause. I told myself it was easier that way. Gratitude made you visible and visible things could be judged or left behind. So, I disappeared behind the drywall of their comfort, the hidden beam that never broke until now. Sometimes after 12-hour shifts at the hospital, I'd sit by the window with peppermint tea and wonder what it would feel like to simply be seen. Not for what I could solve or pay for or hold together. Just seen not as a backup plan, not as scaffolding, but as Lena. But those thoughts were luxuries and wishes. Wishes were for golden boys with sketchbooks, not girls with tax software and heating bills. That's so I kept going. I brought the bread pudding every Christmas, the one they loved, and smiled when they asked who made this again, like it floated in on a holiday breeze. When Julian's rent fell short, I wired money without a word. When my parents called, confused by their W-2s, I stayed on the phone past midnight, guiding them line by line. While my own taxes waited in a neat, unopened pile beside the fridge, I told myself love meant showing up, being steady, solving everything. That one day, if I carried enough weight, someone would turn around and finally see me under it. But standing there in my tiny kitchen, the phone still warm from the call that had banished me from Christmas for being too much, I knew better. They wouldn't see me. Not because they didn't care, but because I had never asked them to. I had trained them not to. That night, with cinnamon clinging to the air and snow falling like absolution beyond my window, I picked up my phone, not to call, not to beg. I opened my banking app. Quietly, I hit cancel. The $8,000 I'd been sending each month to keep their mortgage afloat, gone. Emergency savings locked. No more surprise repairs. No more middle-of-the-night rescues. Julian's dead car battery next winter. That would be his problem. At first, it felt robotic. Just a few taps. Cancel auto transfer. End payment authorization. Freeze joint access like brushing my teeth or paying my rent. Routine. But with every click, a strange stillness unfurled inside me. Not numbness, not bitterness. It felt like freedom. A bird stretching inside me, wings dry, tentative. Realizing the cage door had been left ajar this whole time, I opened my notebook and made a list. Not to guilt myself, just to see all the quiet debts I had swallowed without a word. The flights, the surprise surgeries, the bounced checks, the broken down cars, the dozens of emergencies I had patched up behind the scenes without thanks, without ceremony. The ink blurred, not from tears, but from the weight of finally witnessing my own exhaustion. I wasn't angry, no matter how they'd spin it later. Lena's being cold. Lena's always so intense. No, I wasn't angry. As we and the thing about being invisible for so long is people only notice when you're gone. When things fall. The missed mortgage payment wouldn't sting until the final notice came. The cancelled maintenance fund wouldn't matter until the pipes burst again in January. Julian's gigs would still rise and fall like waves. But this time, no net beneath him. No quiet sister stitching it all together with love and bank wires. I didn't make announcements. No dramatic exit. No cryptic Facebook posts. I didn't even tell Aunt Ramona, the only one who still mailed birthday cards in cursive. I just unplugged the half-written Christmas message I drafted wishing warmth and love. I deleted it. The little tree I'd set up in the corner. I unplugged its lights. The presents I'd wrapped carefully, thoughtfully, I slid them into the hall closet, their shiny paper suddenly ridiculous in the face of my decision. I didn't cry. There was no room for sadness, just clarity. Love isn't supposed to feel like an unpaid job. Family shouldn't feel like a subscription with a hidden fee. I had spent decades trying to earn what should have been freely given. But silence is not love and usefulness is not belonging. Across town in a house filled with lights and noise, they laughed without me. And for the first time, I let them. I let them build their celebration on the illusion they had spent years curating. The one where I was the problem. The one where my silence was interpreted as bitterness. My distance as blame where I was the heavy one, the complicated one, the one who never quite fit the sparkle of their curated holidays. For the first time, I didn't show up. And in doing so, I reclaimed something I hadn't even known I'd surrendered. Christmas morning arrived, soft and gray, the Denver skyline cloaked in fog, snow clinging to the roofs like forgotten frosting. The silence outside echoed the silence within. I sat by the window wrapped in my favorite blanket, the one that smelled faintly of rosemary and comfort. A warm mug of cinnamon apple tea cradled in my hands, the steam rising like memory. I didn't light the tree. I didn't press play on the carefully curated holiday playlist. I once used to fill the gaps. I didn't call. I didn't text. I simply was quiet, whole still. The presents I'd wrapped sat untouched in the corner. Colorful, cheerful, a little naive. They looked foreign now, like they belonged to someone who still believed that effort guaranteed belonging. But there was no grief that morning. No ache, no tears, just stillness. Sacred cleansing stillness, like the breath after a long scream, like air after a storm. I hadn't realized how much noise I'd been carrying until it vanished. Time moved differently that day. Noon passed like a whisper. No calls, no background clatter from my parents' kitchen. No festive selfies from Julian and Marina with hashtags about joy. No Venmo requests for surprise holiday expenses, just silence. I felt no urge to interrupt it until evening fell and the sky turned a bruised purple. My phone buzzed once, then again, 3 times in total. At first, I ignored it. Probably some group thread from work I'd forgotten to mute. But then a message lit the screen. Ramona, can you answer? You've done enough damage already. I froze. Damage? I hadn't even been there. My phone rang. Her name flashed again. I picked up, my voice rough from disuse. What happened? Her tone was gentle, like she was approaching something broken. They're saying you ruined Christmas, she said quietly. But Lena, you weren't even there. The words hit like ice. I blinked. How do you ruin something you weren't invited to? She hesitated, then began explaining in fragmented pieces. Apparently, sometime after dinner, Marina, wine glass in hand, began admiring the family photos on the mantel. She had paused in front of one photo, a faded, slightly crooked snapshot from a birthday party long ago. I must have been 11 or 12. Caught mid-laugh in a too big maroon sweater, one sleeve nearly swallowing my hand. Marina tilted her head, squinting, and then she said it clearly enough for the whole living room to hear. That's Jar. Lena Morgan, isn't it? Aunt Ramona nodded slowly. She's the one who sat with my neighbor through the night. Saved her life. Really? The air shifted. Laughter cut off like someone had flipped a switch. Forks hovered midair. Glasses stopped clinking. Julian went pale. My mother's smile froze. Marina looked from face to face and asked, Wait, Lena's your sister, the one you talk about? No one answered right away, but whatever they said, whatever half-truth or evasive comment came next was enough. Marina gathered her things, thanked everyone with a politeness sharp enough to cut glass, and walked out. Just like that, by the time Aunt Ramona called me, the ripple had already begun. Marina had posted something. Nothing explosive, just honest. A few sharp lines about how families rewrite people to fit prettier stories. About how silence is a form of eraser. About the damage done in rooms lined with smiling photos of people you pretend don't exist. I didn't know the exact wording. I didn't need to. I could picture it clearly. The crash of the curated image. The family friends reading between the lines. The art circles in New York small and gossipy. The quiet unraveling of a brand built on charm and exclusivity. And for once someone else had noticed, not someone raised in it, not someone trained to interpret cruelty as affection, someone who had seen me, not as a burden, but as a human being, a doctor, a sister, a presence. That night, sitting alone in the stillness of my apartment, I learned something more powerful than any comeback. Sometimes the sharpest truth is the silence you leave behind. The day after Christmas, it began. Desperation leaking through polished cracks. An email titled, "Let's Reset Things." It read like a corporate memo. Bland, polished, full of nothing. It was signed jointly by my mother, my father, and Julian. As if unity could overwrite decades of fracture. No real apology, just talk of heightened emotions, holiday stress, valuing family. Buried halfway down, I found the real request. Could I reach out to Marina, clarify things, smooth it over? Not because they missed me, not because they finally understood, but because Julian's art career was at risk. It wasn't about me. It had never been about me. Just the mess my absence had left behind. A mirror they could no longer avoid. They hadn't reached out because they missed me. They had simply realized the cost of erasing me had risen higher than they were willing to pay. I didn't reply. That night, as snow whispered against my windows, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't family. It was the hospital administrator. David Reynolds, a man I'd only met once at a charity gala. Kind eyes, firm handshake. He sounded hesitant. "Lena," he began. "This is a little awkward, but I got a call from your father." He cleared his throat. "He said he's worried about your emotional well-being, that maybe you've been under stress lately and might need some time off." My blood turned to ice. Not the kind that numbs, but the kind that hardens. Sharp, weaponizing concern. My father, the man who once laughed that I was too intense for my own good, was now using that very trait to paint me unstable. Not because he believed it, but because he thought it would control me, shake me, scare me into silence. Didn't work. David saw through it, said as much. But the message was clear. They weren't seeking reconciliation. They were seeking leverage. And that failed. The next move came a curated smear campaign through group texts, quiet whispers to cousins and distant aunts. "Lena's just going through a tough time right now. She's isolating herself. She's overwhelmed." No mention of Christmas. No mention of exclusion. Just concerned, weaponized into control. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since Julian's first art show messaged me out of nowhere. "Hey love, if you ever need a yoga retreat, I've got a discount code." Overwhelmed the awake. Each polished manipulation, every betrayal wrapped in performative care only sharpened my clarity. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting their narrative. The one where Julian was the gifted heart of the family, and I was the quiet utility who never made waves. But I was done smoothing their story. The snow outside kept falling, slowly, erasing the footprints of every path I'd taken to make myself smaller for them. And for the first time, I felt no urge to correct the record. No need to defend myself and you the truth. But it didn't end there. It never does. Not with people who believe they are entitled to your silence. It came next, wrapped in softness, my mother's voice outside my door. A quiet Sunday, mid-January, that bone-deep winter cold pressing against the windows like it was breathing. I was at my desk charting patient notes. A mug of tea sat forgotten beside me. That's when I heard it, a soft knock. I didn't move. I just listened to my heartbeat. Steady, calm. Then I rose, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. There they were. My mother, my father, Julian, bundled in coats, smiles stretched thin. A picture-perfect apology framed in desperation. I wouldn't open the door. Not yet. I didn't feel fear, just a detached, aching sadness. The kind you feel when you finally realize the rescue ship you spent years watching for was just another mirage on the horizon. I opened the door an inch, just enough to let the cold slip through the crack and sting my skin, not enough to invite them in. My mother spoke first. Her voice was soft, practiced, coated in something meant to sound maternal. "We just want to talk," she said, gripping her purse like it might hold all the right words. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't soften because I finally saw it clearly. They weren't here for me. They were here for the old version of me. The one who still believed love could be earned. The girl who folded herself smaller and smaller to squeeze into the tiny spaces they offered. That girl didn't live here anymore. Silence swelled between us, brittle and loud. I watched my father's jaw twitch, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. Julian shifted from foot to foot like his sneakers might lift him off the porch entirely. They were uncomfortable. After a moment, I gave them the only word that mattered. No. No speeches, no justifications, no bridges built out of my own splinters. Just no. My mother's face cracked. Part confusion, part disbelief, as if she couldn't fathom that the reliable scaffolding she'd leaned on for decades had finally crumbled by choice. I closed the door quietly. Not a slam, not a statement, just a boundary. I loved it with steady hands. Outside, I heard the rise and fall of muffled voices. First pleading, then sharper, tinged with the frustration of people not used to being denied. But I didn't listen. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and wrapped my fingers around my mug of cold tea, letting the silence wrap around me like something sacred. On the shelf beside me sat the framed letter from Marina, the ink slightly smudged, her handwriting pressed with intention and care. I looked at it and felt for the first time weightless. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to mold myself into a daughter they could applaud, of how I'd soaked up their guilt, their silence, their neglect, and turned it into fuel to keep showing up. I was never meant to be a mirror, ever born to reflect their pride or to absorb their disappointment. There was something else. And maybe finally that was enough. They didn't leave right away. I heard shoes shuffle, voices murmur, desperation curling at the edges. Then another knock softer. "Lena, please. We just want to talk." I stayed seated. The framed letter from Marina anchoring me. My tea cold, bitter, and strangely satisfying. I let the knocking continue until it softened, then stopped. Silence settled again. Not hollow this time, but full. For the first time, I understood. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means choosing not to. Sometimes it means standing tall while the very people who fractured you exhaust themselves against the boundary you finally had the strength to build, a wall not made of bitterness but of self-worth. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then came the shuffle of retreating footsteps, the dull clunk of car doors, the hesitant hum of the engine. They were gone. Not shattered, just denied. I stood and walked slowly to the window, drawing the curtain back just enough to see the tail lights fading into the snow-dusted street. I didn't flinch. I didn't reach for my phone. I felt no pull to run after them. No aching desire to fix what they had broken with their silence. Only peace. Real peace. The kind that settles deep in your chest when you finally stop begging for a seat at a table that was never set for you. Turned away from the window. My apartment felt warmer now. Not louder, not brighter, just mine. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner, its lights unplugged, ornaments untouched. But it no longer looked sad, the wrapped gifts still there, but no longer symbols of rejection. They were reminders. I had tried. I had loved. I had given the best parts of myself with open hands. They just never saw it. I brought another cup of tea, stronger this time. Let the steam rise around my face as I pulled the blanket tighter across my shoulders and returned to my desk. The letter from Marina caught the afternoon light. You made a difference. She had written. You didn't give up. You made her feel like she mattered. My fingers brushed the frame. Wooden, imperfect, solid. The cool glass was smooth beneath my skin. Real, unshakable. Even when your family refuses to see your worth, someone else will, someone honest, someone watching. I thought of all the years I spent folding myself to fit. And finally realized I was never meant to be smaller. Not for them, but Up or anyone. Closing the door hadn't been an act of cruelty. It was clarity. They hadn't come because they loved me. They came because they needed control. The quiet, dependable version of me who no longer existed. But that girl, she was gone. In her place stood a woman who finally knew. Love doesn't require your silence. It doesn't demand your sacrifice, and it never ever asks you to shatter just to keep someone else whole. I sat back, sipped my tea, and watched the snowfall. Soft, silent, cleansing, and I realized this time I had saved myself. Maybe for the first time I was free. The days passed slowly, gently, like deep breaths after a storm. The silence no longer felt like isolation. It felt like space, space I had never been allowed to claim before. I went back to work. I made rounds at the hospital. I sat with patients whose families came with flowers and cards and with those whose rooms stayed empty except for the hum of machines and my quiet presence. I listened. I stayed. I did the work that mattered. The kind that doesn't trend online, that doesn't make for glossy photo albums, but holds lives together all the same. Then one afternoon, a small package arrived. No return address, just my name handwritten on the brown paper in neat slanted lettering. I opened it carefully. Inside was thick ivory stationery. The ink slightly smudged at the edges. It was from Marina. She wrote about her grandmother. How she still practiced yoga twice a week, still walked to the farmer's market every Saturday. She remembered in detail the days when the world had quietly started giving up on her, and how there had been one doctor who hadn't, who stayed past visiting hours, who treated her like a person, not a patient, a woman still capable of joy, still worthy of dignity. You didn't just save her life, she wrote. You reminded her she was still living. I read the letter 3 times, traced the words with my fingers, and that night I framed it, hung it above my desk where the morning sun could touch it, a quiet, permanent reminder. I was never invisible, never too much, never a burden. I was exactly who I needed to be all along. And their inability to see that was never mine to carry. Weeks later, another email arrived. Less polished this time, more desperate. We miss you. We never meant to hurt you. Can we start over? And buried near the end, like a sliver under the skin, came the real reason. Please ask Marina to take down her post. Ethan's having trouble finding work now. It's affecting his future. Not an apology, not remorse, just another transaction, another debt they assumed I'd pay to keep the peace. I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. Not out of hate, but out of self-respect. That evening, as I filed notes at my desk, Sunlight stretched across the letter from Marina. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because someone finally told me I mattered, but because I had stopped asking for permission to believe it. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, tell me what part hit home, or simply say you see me. Because maybe in doing so, we remind others they're not alone. If you've ever felt overlooked, like you had to earn love through silence or sacrifice, please know this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say no. And you are allowed to build a life that doesn't include people who only show up when it benefits them. Let's start choosing peace over performance. Hi, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'm 29, work as a financial analyst, and live in a small apartment downtown. Most people would say I have a pretty normal life. But my family would probably tell you I'm heartless. Not because I've ever been mean or cruel, but because I stopped saying yes to everything. Let me tell you about my sister Emma. She's 2 years older than me, but somehow I've always felt like the big sister. Emma has this talent for making every problem sound like a disaster that someone else should fix. She loses jobs because her bosses are terrible. She gets kicked out of apartments because her roommates are jealous. She can't pay bills because life is just so unfair. My parents, Linda and Robert, never question her stories. They just jump into action, trying to solve everything. And when they can't fix things themselves, they call me. You're doing well, Sarah. You're in a position to help. I heard those words so many times they became background music to my life. Car payments, rent money, legal fees, there was always something. And when I dared to say no, suddenly I was the bad guy. I was selfish. I was forgetting what family meant. I learned pretty quickly that my worth to them wasn't about being loved. It was about being useful. But everyone has their breaking point. Mine came at Sunday dinner last month. You know how some families have traditions. Ours was Sunday dinner. Same food, same table, same tension hiding behind polite conversation. That particular Sunday felt different though. Something was planned. Mom greeted me at the door with the biggest fake smile I'd ever seen. You look so skinny, honey. Are you eating enough? Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. Emma was already at the table, staring at her phone, avoiding eye contact like a kid who broke something. I knew what was coming. When Mom acts extra sweet and Dad goes quiet, it means they're about to drop news they know I won't like. We got through the salad. Mom talked about the weather like it was breaking news. Dad kept drinking his wine. Emma picked at her food like it might fight back. Then Mom put down her fork, folded her hands, and gave me that special smile she saved for big requests. Sarah, she said in her softest voice, we've been talking. Emma's going through a tough time right now, and we think it would be good if she moved in with you for a while. Just like that. No asking. No discussion. She said it like she was offering me dessert. I felt the whole room hold its breath. They were waiting for me to argue so they could call me selfish. I looked at Emma. She glanced up quickly, then back down. Dad cleared his throat, ready for a fight. Instead, I smiled. Of course, I said calmly. If it helps Emma get back on track, I don't see any problem with that. The silence was deafening. Mom blinked, totally caught off guard. Dad relaxed like he'd dodged a bullet. Emma leaned back in her chair with this smug look spreading across her face. None of them noticed how still I went after that. How quiet. They thought I'd given up. But here's what they didn't know, I hadn't lived in that apartment for weeks. And I had zero intention of letting Emma move into a place that didn't exist anymore. I didn't wake up one day and decide to trick my family. This was years in the making. Years of being taken for granted, of being the family ATM, of realizing that being the responsible one just meant being the most convenient to use. When I was 22, Emma's car got taken away. She called crying, saying she couldn't get to her new job without wheels. This job was different, she promised. She just needed help getting started. My credit was perfect, so co-signing seemed like no big deal. 3 weeks later, she stopped showing up to work. Stopped making payments too. Guess whose credit score took the hit? At 24, Mom called me in tears because they were behind on their mortgage. Dad had lost his job. Emma had moved back home. I sent $2,500 the next day. No one even said thank you. At Christmas, Mom gave me a coffee mug that said, "World's Greatest Daughter." I almost laughed out loud. When I was 26, Emma got arrested for drunk driving. At least, it was the first time we knew about it. Dad begged me to keep it quiet, said it would ruin the family's reputation. I paid for her lawyer. Emma never even acknowledged it. A year later when she got arrested again and I refused to help, Mom called me cold-hearted. "You've never understood what it's like to worry about someone you love," she said. "Emma's life is harder than yours." That's when I finally understood. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a function. A wallet with legs. A problem solver they could turn on whenever something broke. I started pulling back slowly. Saying, "I'll think about it," instead of, "yes." Declining requests politely. Changing the subject when they brought up money. They noticed right away. And they did not like it. One night I sat in my apartment, the one I'd bought without anyone's help, decorated with furniture I'd saved up for, paid for with my own hard work. I stared at my front door and realized I didn't feel safe there anymore. Because when my family needed something, suddenly it wasn't my apartment. It was ours. Just like my time, my money, my patience, nothing was really mine. So I made a decision. I called a real estate agent and quietly sold my place. I moved to a small rental across town. Nobody asked where I was going, so I didn't tell them. I could have explained, but I didn't. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Sometimes when you grow up in a family that only remembers you exist when they need something, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is disappear just enough to breathe. The text started the following Monday. "We'll bring Emma's mattress on Saturday. Dad's loading boxes Friday night. She's so excited to finally have her own space." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They were talking to a version of me that no longer existed. Each message assumed I would just open my door, rearrange my life, and absorb the chaos without making a sound. They'd done it before. They just didn't know I'd stopped listening. By Thursday, Mom was texting me daily. "Let me know if you need help cleaning before she moves in. Emma says she won't be any trouble. She's bringing her own dishes." That last one made me laugh. Emma hadn't washed a dish in years. I let it all play out. I didn't correct them. I didn't push back. I just waited. Saturday morning, I left early. Got coffee, drove around town, walked through a farmer's market I had no intention of buying anything from. I stood in the sunshine longer than I needed to. My phone buzzed in my pocket 4 times before I looked. Missed calls. Voicemails. I let the 5th call go through. Sarah. It was Mom, but not her soft voice. The panicked one. "What's going on?" There's some man here. He says he lives in the condo. Says you don't live here anymore. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt for years, that unsteady feeling when everything you thought you knew suddenly shifts. You didn't tell us, she snapped. You never said anything. No, I replied evenly. I didn't. There was chaos in the background. Dad's voice getting sharp. Emma saying something I couldn't make out. Sarah, Mom hissed. What is this? I sold the condo, I said simply. Weeks ago. You what? I moved out. I didn't think it mattered since nobody asked where I lived. Silence. I imagined them standing on that porch with boxes and bags, realizing they'd shown up to invade a castle that wasn't there anymore. Then Dad's voice cut through. You lied to us. You said she could move in. I said if it helps Emma, I don't see why not. I never said where. Another pause. A sharp breath from Mom. From Emma, finally. So what are we supposed to do now? She sounded young when she said it. Not angry, just lost. For a split second, I almost caved. But I didn't. Because here's what they didn't understand, I hadn't moved out of anger. I hadn't sold my place to make a point. I did it because I was tired of living somewhere that never felt like mine. I did it because I deserved to come home without bracing for impact. And because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people who refuse to change is to stop making room for their chaos. They thought that was the end of it. They were wrong. By evening, they were at my new door. I knew they'd come. Even as I drank my coffee that morning, even as I ignored their calls, I knew Mom wouldn't let it go. She'd hunt me down just to prove that no matter how far I moved, I was still reachable. Still obligated. The knock came at sunset. 3 quick, sharp hits. The kind you hear when someone's trying to stay polite but is barely holding it together. I looked through the peephole. Linda, Robert, Emma, and a car full of boxes parked at the curb like it was moving day. I opened the door halfway. You found me, I said flatly. Mom looked frazzled. Her makeup was smeared and her hair was messy like she'd been running her hands through it. We tried calling, she said, voice tight. We didn't think you'd we didn't think you'd be here. It's my apartment, I said. But you said Dad's voice was rising now. You said she could move in. Now we're standing here with all her stuff and you're acting like we're strangers. I didn't move from the doorway. I never said she could move in here. I said if it helps Emma, I don't see why not. That was about the old place, which I don't live in anymore. Emma stepped forward, arms crossed, face red with anger. This is petty, Sarah. You always act like you're better than everyone. But this is just cruel. I tilted my head. You packed up your entire life and drove across the city to move into someone's apartment without even confirming it still existed. That's not cruelty. That's entitlement. Emma's voice cracked. You're my sister. Yes, I said coolly. And you've spent years confusing that with free housing. Dad stepped between us, his voice sharp with warning. Enough, Sarah. We're not leaving. We've put up with enough from you. You owe this to your sister. There it was. The word that had been hanging over me for years. Oh. As if every dollar I'd paid, every problem I'd solved, every sleepless night I'd spent cleaning up messes I didn't make had been written down somewhere as part of a contract I never signed. I stepped back and picked up my phone. What are you doing? Mom asked, eyes narrowing. I didn't answer. I dialed. 3 rings. 911, what's your emergency? My voice stayed calm. Yes, I have family members outside my apartment who are refusing to leave. They're not on the lease and weren't invited. I'd like to report trespassing. Emma's mouth fell open. Dad swore under his breath. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. Sarah, she whispered, almost pleading. You're calling the police on your own family. I asked you to leave, I said. You didn't. The dispatcher asked for my address. I gave it. Emma's voice shook with rage. This is going to ruin everything. Do you know what people will think? Do you know what they'll say? Yes, I said. They'll say I finally stopped opening my door. Mom's voice dropped to something smaller. You used to be kind. I didn't flinch. You used to notice when I was hurting. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, packed with every ignored boundary, every swallowed word, every time I'd said yes when I wanted to scream no. A police car pulled up 10 minutes later. The officer stepped out, tall and calm. Evening, she said. We received a call about trespassing. I nodded. That was me. She looked at my parents, at Emma, at the car full of bags. Ma'am, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. This is our daughter, Robert said. And this is her residence, the officer replied, which you're not allowed to occupy without permission. Emma looked like she might cry or throw something. You're going to regret this, Sarah. No, I said. I've regretted almost everything up until this point. This is the first thing I'm sure of. The next day I woke up to 15 missed calls. 7 from Mom, 3 from Dad, the rest from relatives I hadn't talked to in years. Then came the texts. Why would you do this to your own sister? Your mother is devastated. Emma's sleeping in her car. Is that what you wanted? I didn't reply. I just scrolled through them all. Eventually, I found what I was looking for, a Facebook post from my mother. Public, 3 paragraphs long, punctuated with crying emojis and a photo of Emma as a little girl. We raised both our daughters to care for each other. But one of them has forgotten what that means. We're heartbroken that Sarah, so successful and fortunate, would turn her back on family in our time of need. Emma didn't deserve this. None of us did. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments from people I hadn't seen since middle school, calling me selfish, cold, ungrateful. It wasn't new, just louder. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, for the first time in my life, I posted my own response. A simple thread with no drama, no hashtags. Just screenshots. The $2,500 transfer for their mortgage. My name on Emma's car loan next to the collections notice. The lawyer bill from her DUI case. A timeline of every one-time favor since I was 22. The receipt showing I'd sold my condo. And finally, a message Emma had sent me 2 years ago calling me a boring robot because I wouldn't let her crash at my place for a month. I ended with one line, I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt. I turned off my phone after that. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't need applause. I just needed quiet. And for once, I had it. That night, my apartment was perfectly still. No noise from the hallway, no buzzing phone. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old pipes. I made tea, chamomile, not because I needed help sleeping, but for the ritual. A warm cup held in both hands, steam rising like the forgiveness I'd finally given myself. My phone lit up once. Mom. Then again. Emma. I didn't open the messages. I didn't need to. I knew the pattern by now: shock, anger, guilt trips, pleading. Always in that order. I blocked both numbers. Not out of cruelty or pride, but because not every door deserves to be knocked on forever. I walked out onto my balcony. It was chilly, but not harsh. The kind of cold that reminds you you're alive. Below, the city hummed along. People walking, headlights glowing, someone walking their dog in a coat too big for the weather. A neighbor 2 floors down waved when she saw me. I waved back. It was simple, that small gesture, but it was more real than most of the things I'd done out of obligation for years. Inside, I turned off the lights one by one. Living room, kitchen, hallway. No family photos on the walls, no guilt-inducing reminders. Just quiet, clean space. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter or broken. I just felt done. Done performing. Done explaining. Done being the emergency contact for people who never learned to handle their own emergencies. Somewhere out there, they were probably rewriting the story again, casting me as the villain or the cold daughter or the ungrateful child. Let them. I didn't come here to be loved for what I could provide. I came here to remember what it felt like to just exist without owing anyone anything. They told their story like I had vanished. And you know what? Maybe I had. Maybe that was exactly what I needed to do. The backyard was filled with the smoky smell of grilled meat and the sound of laughter. It was another one of those family gatherings where everyone pretended everything was perfect. I stood by myself near the garden, watching my relatives chat and drink. At 32, I was still the black sheep, the one who supposedly never got her life together. My sister Maya was the star of the show, as usual. She wore this bright yellow dress and told everyone about her latest achievements. Mom couldn't stop bragging about her. Maya just got her business degree from Columbia, she announced loudly enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. She's interviewing with top companies left and right. That girl has such a bright future ahead. I took a sip of my iced tea and waited for what always came next. Unlike some people, Mom continued, looking straight at me, who still haven't figured out what they want to be when they grow up. Right, Sarah? I just shrugged and stayed quiet. Dad was busy with the barbecue, but he couldn't resist joining in. Still playing around with that computer stuff? He asked with a laugh. What do you call it again? Some kind of online thing. His tone wasn't mean, but it wasn't respectful either. It never was. I ran my finger along my cold glass and thought about tomorrow morning's meeting. The one where I'd be signing papers to buy out our biggest competitor. The meeting where I, as founder and CEO of TechFlow Solutions, would approve our expansion into 3 new markets. Something like that, I said quietly, letting it go like I always did. Suddenly, Maya clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. Guess what, everyone? I have this amazing interview tomorrow with TechFlow Solutions. They contacted me directly. It's one of the most successful consulting firms in the state. The whole family erupted in cheers and congratulations. My cousin rushed over with a glass of wine. That's incredible, Maya. I saw a news story about their CEO recently. She's supposed to be this brilliant woman who built the whole company from nothing. Dad nodded approvingly. They're super picky about who they hire. You must really have impressed them. I almost choked on my drink. I remembered the resume sitting in my email, Maya's resume, which my HR team had flagged as barely qualified. She had no clue that the company she'd been obsessing over for months was actually mine. The same company I'd built from my tiny apartment 10 years ago while she was busy getting degrees that other people paid for. What job are you going for? I asked casually. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. Senior Business Consultant. It's basically a management position. Can you believe it? Wow, I replied, hiding my smile behind my glass. I'm sure that'll be interesting. Maya laughed and then said in this fake sweet voice, maybe when I get hired, I can help you out, Sarah. I bet they need people to answer phones or something basic like that. Mom nodded like this was the most generous thing she'd ever heard. How thoughtful of you, honey. Your sister definitely needs all the help she can get. 32 years old and still doing whatever it is she does. She waved her hand dismissively in my direction. I thought about my office on the 30th floor of downtown's tallest building. About the magazine article that called me one of the top women entrepreneurs in the country. They'd used my professional name, S.R. Mitchell, and kept my photo shadowy to protect my privacy. I'd spent a decade building my empire in secret. By choice. I always knew this day would come eventually. That's really nice of you to offer, I said calmly. Good luck tomorrow. Maya smoothed down her dress like she was already practicing for her executive role. Luck is for people who don't work hard enough. You should try putting in some real effort sometime. The conversation moved on to other family gossip while I just listened. Tomorrow would change everything. And I wanted to remember this moment, the last time they'd all see me as the family failure. As the sun started setting, Maya stood up and clinked her glass for attention again. I should head home early, she announced. I want to be fresh for tomorrow. The actual CEO of TechFlow is going to be in my final interview. Some woman named S.R. Mitchell. Nobody really knows much about her personally. Maya flipped her hair confidently. But I'm sure she'll love me. By tomorrow night, I'll be part of their executive team. She looked at Mom with a wink. Maybe then you'll finally have something to brag about. Mom actually started tearing up. Oh sweetheart, we're already so proud. At least one of my daughters stayed focused on her goals. I checked my phone. In about 14 hours, Maya would walk into that conference room and see me sitting at the head of the table. In 14 hours, everything they believed about me would crumble. I gathered my things and mumbled something about having work to do. Oh right, your little remote job, Mom said dismissively. Just don't forget to send money for Dad's birthday present. Maya already covered most of it, again. I nodded without saying anything. They didn't need to know that my little remote job had made more money last quarter than most people see in a lifetime. Let them think whatever they wanted. I got into my plain gray car, the boring one I drove to family events, leaving my luxury sports car safely parked at the office downtown. As I backed out of the driveway, I could hear Maya's voice carrying across the yard. Tomorrow changes everything. She was absolutely right. Just not the way she thought. By 6:30 the next morning, I was already in my corner office watching the sunrise over the city. The quiet sounds of the building coming to life were somehow comforting. I'd built all of this from nothing, and today it would all come full circle. I put on my best navy blue power suit. It felt less like clothes and more like armor. My assistant, Jennifer, knocked softly before coming in. Your sister's interview is scheduled for 9 sharp, she said, handing me a folder. She's already downstairs. Got here 30 minutes early. Punctual. That's new for her, I said, raising an eyebrow. She's also been posting on social media about her future executive position here. Marketing noticed. She even told our front desk staff that she plans to modernize the vibe once she's hired. I couldn't help but laugh. Has she now? I opened the folder to look at Maya's resume. On paper, she looked perfect. Great grades, nice internships, glowing recommendations. But I knew the truth. The internships came through Dad's golf buddies. The recommendations were from our uncle's law firm where she'd barely worked. It was all connections and no substance. The board is curious why you're handling this interview personally, Jennifer added with a knowing look. Quality control, I said simply, standing up from my desk. How many interviews before she gets to me? 3, Jennifer replied. All our senior people. They know what questions to ask. By 9 o'clock, I was watching through the one-way glass as Maya strutted into our main conference room. Designer suit, expensive shoes, attitude for days. She shook hands with the first interviewer like she already owned the place. Over the next 2 hours, I watched her confidence slowly fall apart. Every rehearsed answer got picked apart. Every shallow accomplishment got questioned. Every assumption got challenged. By the time she got to the final interview with me, she looked tired, uncertain, and stressed. Send her in, I told Jennifer. Maya walked into my office trying not to look impressed by the floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive art, and commanding view of the city. My chair was turned away from her, facing the windows. Please sit down, Miss Johnson, I said in a professional voice. Thank you so much for meeting with me, Ms. Mitchell, she replied, folding her hands in her lap. I know how busy you must be. I turned my chair around slowly, letting the moment stretch out. Actually, I said, looking directly into her eyes, it's Miss Sarah Rose Mitchell. All the color drained from her face as reality hit her. The name on the building, the initials in the press releases, the sister she'd been dismissing for years. Hello, Maya, I said with a calm smile. Surprised to see your directionless sister running the company you've been dreaming about. She blinked rapidly, her perfect composure completely falling apart. Whatever polished speech she'd practiced was gone. But this can't be right, she stammered. You just do freelance work from home. That's what Mom told everyone. Do I? I gestured toward the wall behind me, covered with awards, magazine covers, and recognition for TechFlow Solutions being one of the fastest growing companies in the region. I built this entire company from scratch while you and Mom were laughing about my computer stuff. Every time you showed off your degree, I was closing million-dollar deals. Every time Dad called my work a phase, I was hiring more employees. You tricked us, her voice cracked, getting higher with disbelief. You lied to everyone. No, Maya, I replied calmly. You all tricked yourselves. You were so convinced I was a failure that none of you ever bothered to ask what I was actually doing. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen so she could see. Remember that birthday money Mom mentioned? I just sent my share. It's more than most people make in a year. For me, it's loose change. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry, humiliated tears. So what now? Are you going to embarrass me in front of the whole family? I shook my head. I don't need to say anything. Your interview performance today speaks for itself. 3 different managers, completely independent of each other, all recommended we don't hire you. Too entitled, too shallow, unprepared, arrogant. You set me up for failure. I gave you exactly what you asked for, an interview with the CEO. It's not my fault you weren't ready for it. I stood up, smoothing my suit. I suggest you look elsewhere for work, Maya. And maybe get some real experience this time. Something beyond social media posts and Dad's connections. She stood up shakily, her expensive outfit suddenly looking more like a costume than professional wear. Do Mom and Dad know who you really are? They will, I said, walking toward the door. I'm sure you'll tell them all about your interview with S.R. Mitchell. I pressed the intercom button. "Jennifer, please escort Miss Johnson out. And cancel my dinner plans with the family tonight. I have a board meeting that needs my attention." As the door closed behind her, I could hear her voice break in the hallway, followed by quiet crying. Not exactly the victory lap she'd planned. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with family messages. "Mom was first. What kind of sick joke is this? Maya is devastated." Then Dad, "How could you humiliate your sister like this? We raised you better than this." I looked at the messages, took a deep breath, and turned my phone face down. They finally knew who I really was. They just hadn't figured out yet that I'd stopped needing their approval years ago. I sent one message to the family group chat: "You raised me to be successful. Congratulations, you did. Maybe now you'll recognize what real achievement looks like." Then I turned off my phone and got back to what actually mattered, running a multi-million-dollar company that had revolutionized an entire industry while they were too busy mocking me to notice. Let them adjust to this new reality at their own pace. I wasn't going to slow down for their discomfort. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Family phone calls became awkward and strained. The dismissive jokes about my work disappeared, replaced by uncomfortable silences and forced smiles during video calls. Maya eventually took a basic coordinator job at a small firm across town. It wasn't the career-defining opportunity she'd imagined. No fancy title, no corner office, just regular work that she had to earn the normal way. Mom and Dad stopped hosting their weekly family dinners. Maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe they didn't know how to handle having a daughter they'd underestimated now running an empire they'd once ridiculed. But the moment that sealed everything happened 3 months later. A major business magazine published a cover story called "The Quiet Success," how one woman built a fortune while her family thought she was failing. My picture was on the cover, full face, professional suit, with TechFlow's headquarters in the background. No shadows, no mystery, just me. I had copies delivered to every family member's house. No note, no message, just the magazine and the truth. The article told my whole story, from doing small freelance jobs in a cramped apartment to building one of the most innovative technology companies in the country. It talked about the struggles, the sacrifices, and the determination they never saw because they never bothered to look. The final line read, "Sometimes success doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes it just pays the bills." And honestly, that was enough for me. I didn't need their praise anymore, or their recognition, or their approval. I had built something real, something lasting, something they could never diminish or take away. Let them tell their friends whatever story makes them feel better. Let them pretend they always believed in me. Meanwhile, I'll be at TechFlow, expanding into new markets, closing bigger deals, and mentoring the next generation of entrepreneurs who are building their dreams in the shadows. Success had already spoken for itself. And I had no intention of turning down the volume. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have supported you most, I see you. I spent years being called unfocused, impractical, and lost. While my sister collected praise, I was the family's disappointment. But I didn't fight back with arguments or try to win their approval. I built something they couldn't ignore, even if they wanted to. Your worth isn't defined by how others see you. It's defined by how you see yourself and what you're willing to work for. So if you've ever felt small at a family gathering, if you've hidden your success to keep peace, or if you're building something great in the shadows, share your story in the comments. Tell me what you're working on, what you've overcome, or who you're proving wrong, not for revenge, but for your own peace of mind. And if you felt even a spark of recognition watching me go from family failure to CEO, make sure to subscribe. Not just for more stories like this, but to join a community that sees through the noise and recognizes quiet strength for what it really is. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. We'll keep building. Because sometimes the best way to win is to work in silence until your name is on the door. Nobody expected me to show up at Dad's funeral. The looks on their faces said it all. But sometimes you have to face the past to move forward with your future. The letter came on a Tuesday morning. Plain white envelope with my name written in Dad's messy handwriting. No return address, just like him. I almost threw it away with all the other mail, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way my hand started shaking when I saw his writing. Inside was a funeral invitation. My father was gone. I sat there staring at the paper, waiting to feel something. Sadness, anger, shock. But all I felt was empty. It had been 10 long years since anyone from the Carter family had spoken to me. A whole decade since I packed up and left Atlanta with nothing but a broken heart and a baby boy. I remember that night clearly. Tommy was just 6 months old, crying in his car seat while I drove away from the only home I'd ever known. I had a black eye and a bag full of baby clothes. I'd finally found the courage to leave a marriage that was slowly destroying me. But when I showed up at Dad's door looking for help, he turned me away. "You made your choice," he said. "Now live with it." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. So I did live with it. I moved to Jacksonville and started over. Got a job at a bookstore, found a small apartment, learned how to be a single mom. It wasn't easy, but it was safe. Tommy and I built our own little world, just the two of us. We were happy. Even though Dad never called or visited, I still sent money every month. I asked Mrs. Henderson next door to deliver it so he wouldn't know it came from me. I never told Tommy about this. Some things are better kept private. Now here I was, holding this funeral invitation, wondering why he wanted me there after all these years. Tommy must have noticed my expression because he came over and sat beside me. "Are you going to go?" he asked quietly. I couldn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. Finally, he added, "Maybe there's something he wanted to tell you, Mom. Maybe this is your chance to say goodbye properly." Looking at my son, my brave, wise 15-year-old boy, I knew he was right. Whatever waited for me back in Atlanta, I needed to face it. So I folded the letter, booked 2 plane tickets, and prepared to return to a place I swore I'd never see again. The church was smaller than I remembered. Old wooden pews, stained glass windows, the smell of old flowers and furniture polish. Walking through those doors felt like stepping back in time. Tommy held my hand as we made our way down the aisle. People turned to stare. Whispers started immediately. There they were in the front row. My brother Jake and sister Emma, dressed in expensive black clothes, looking like they were attending a business meeting instead of their father's funeral. Emma saw me first. Her eyes went wide with surprise, then narrowed with something that looked like anger. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. I guess she heard there might be money involved. Jake laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Some people have no shame," he muttered. I didn't respond. I just kept walking until I found a seat in the back row. I hadn't come to fight. I'd come to pay my respects and maybe find some peace. Tommy squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't let them get to you, Mom." The service began. Prayers, hymns, and speeches about what a great man my father was. They talked about his business success, his community involvement, his dedication to family. They mentioned Jake's achievements and Emma's charity work. But not once did anyone say my name. It was like I had never existed. Tommy leaned against my shoulder, quiet and strong. I wasn't crying, not because I didn't want to, but because I'd done all my crying years ago. When the service ended, people filed out past us. A few distant relatives nodded politely, but most pretended not to see me. Emma brushed past without a glance. Jake stopped just long enough to lean down and whisper, "You shouldn't have come. This isn't your family anymore." Then he was gone, leaving me sitting in that empty church with my son. But I wasn't there to rejoin the family. I was there to close a chapter that had been left unfinished for too long. The family house looked exactly the same. Big white columns, red brick walls, perfectly manicured lawn. But walking through the front door felt like entering a freezer. Cold, unwelcoming, full of people who wished I wasn't there. The living room was crowded with relatives, neighbors, and family friends. They all seemed to be having a good time, eating, drinking, and sharing stories. When they saw me enter with Tommy, the conversations got quieter. I could feel their stares like needles on my skin. Emma stood by the fireplace with a glass of wine, looking more like a hostess at a party than a daughter at her father's funeral. Jake was beside her, also drinking, both of them watching me with cold eyes. "This won't take long," Jake announced to the room. "She was cut out of the will years ago." A few people laughed uncomfortably. Others suddenly became very interested in the family photos on the walls. I kept my coat on even though the room was warm. Tommy stayed close to me, his hand in mine. We found chairs in the back corner, away from the crowd. I looked around at all the family pictures covering the walls. Emma in her wedding dress, Jake with his college diploma, vacation photos from fancy trips. Not a single picture of me, not even from when we were kids. I'd been erased completely. Emma caught me looking and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the kind that says, "You don't belong here." She walked over and said sweetly, "You can stay if you want, Rachel, but don't expect anything. This isn't your story anymore." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. But Tommy looked up at me with such focus, like he was waiting for something important to happen. Somehow, I knew he was right to wait. The room went quiet when the front door opened. Mr. Wilson, Dad's lawyer, walked in carrying his briefcase and a small wooden box. He looked like a man who knew exactly what kind of situation he was walking into. Emma barely looked up from her wine. Jake checked his watch like he had somewhere important to be. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Wilson said in his deep, professional voice. "Before we read the will, Mr. Carter left specific instructions that we watch a video message first." The mood in the room changed instantly. Emma looked annoyed. "A video? Can't we just get to the important part? We all know what the will says." Jake nodded. "Yeah, let's not drag this out. Some of us have flights to catch." But Mr. Wilson didn't budge. He set up a laptop on the coffee table and opened the wooden box. "Your father was very clear about this. The video must be shown before anything else." Emma rolled her eyes. Jake mumbled something under his breath. But everyone gathered around, curious despite themselves. I stayed in my chair, but Tommy sat up straighter beside me. His grip on my hand loosened slightly, and when I looked at him, his face was bright with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. For the first time since entering that house, I didn't feel completely alone. The screen flickered and then there he was. My father, looking older and thinner than I remembered. His shoulders, once so straight and proud, now seemed bent under some invisible weight. His eyes, always so sharp and cold, looked tired and sad. He was sitting at his old desk, the same one that used to be off-limits to us kids. "If Rachel is watching this," he began, his voice rough and quiet, "I owe her an apology I should have given years ago." The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "I was wrong," he continued. "I judged you for leaving a marriage I didn't understand. I thought you were weak. I thought you were being selfish. I believed what I wanted to believe because it was easier than asking the hard questions. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, something I'd never seen before. When you came to my door that night, hurt and scared, carrying your baby, I should have opened my arms. I should have said, "You're safe now." But I didn't. I let my pride speak louder than my love. A lump formed in my throat. Tommy reached for my hand again, his fingers warm and strong. I told myself I was teaching you responsibility. But the truth is, I was punishing you for being braver than I ever taught you to be. For choosing yourself and your child over a situation that was destroying you. Behind me, I could hear people shifting in their chairs, someone breathing heavily. But I couldn't look away from the screen. I found out the truth, Rachel. A few years ago, Mrs. Henderson told me about the monthly envelopes. The money you sent to help with my bills. Even when I gave you nothing, even when I pretended you didn't exist, you never stopped caring. You never stopped being my daughter, even when I stopped being your father. My breath caught. Tears started falling before I could stop them. I watched you from a distance, he said. Mrs. Henderson told me how well you were doing. About the bookstore, about Tommy. She said he's a smart boy, that he looks at the world with kindness, just like you do. He smiled then, small and sad. That broke my heart because I realized what I'd missed. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Rachel. But if I can leave you with anything, let it be this: I was wrong. You were right. You did what I should have taught you to do. You protected your child. You walked away from pain. And you built something beautiful. He took a shaky breath. I don't want to be remembered as the father who abandoned his daughter. So I've changed my will. They don't know yet, but they will. Gasps echoed around the room. Someone cursed. Emma sat up straight. Jake's face went red. All I ever wanted was to be proud of my children, Dad said. And I am proud of you. Of the woman you became when I wasn't looking. Tell Tommy thank you for giving me one last chance to be a grandfather, even from far away. The screen went black. Complete silence filled the room. But for the first time in 10 years, I heard my father loud and clear. Mr. Wilson didn't wait for the shock to wear off. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The video was meant to explain the changes, he said calmly. Now I'll read the revised will, which was properly witnessed and legally filed 2 years ago. Emma gripped her wine glass. Jake crossed his arms, still looking smug like the video meant nothing. To my daughter Rachel Marie Carter, Wilson began, I leave the family home, all its contents, and the surrounding property. The room exploded. Heads turned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. My hands were frozen in my lap, Tommy's small hand still tucked in mine. Additionally, Wilson continued, I leave to Rachel Carter the sum of $300,000 in savings and investments. And to her son, Tommy Carter, I leave a college fund worth $150,000. My heart stopped. Tommy blinked up at me, his mouth open, trying to understand what those numbers meant. I was trying to understand too. Wilson turned the page. To my son Jake and daughter Emma, I leave my collection of family photographs, my military medals, and the family Bible. Emma shot to her feet. What? Her voice cracked. That's impossible. There has to be a mistake. There's no mistake, Wilson said calmly. Your father changed his will 2 years ago. Everything is legal and properly documented. Jake stood up too, his face dark with anger. He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, Wilson replied, closing the folder. He also asked me to read this note aloud. He pulled out a handwritten piece of paper. Let them remember who showed up when it mattered. Let them remember who stayed quiet but never stopped loving. This house should belong to the person who never asked for anything but gave everything anyway. Emma stormed out. Jake followed, slamming the door behind him. One by one, the other relatives slipped away, avoiding eye contact, embarrassed and ashamed. I didn't move. Not because I was in shock, but because for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel erased. I felt chosen. The house was quiet now. Not the angry, tense quiet from before, but peaceful. Calm. I stood up slowly and walked to Dad's old reading chair by the window. It was still there, worn leather cracked at the arms, shaped by years of use. I touched the top gently and whispered, "Goodbye, Dad. I forgive you." The words came easily. They didn't hurt or burn. They just settled into place like they'd been waiting for the right moment. Tommy didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The fireplace crackled softly, casting warm light around the room. For the first time in years, this house didn't feel like a place that had rejected me. It felt like a home that had finally welcomed me back. Maybe some hurts don't disappear. Maybe they just wait for the right words, the right moment, the right person to say, "I'm sorry," and "I love you." And finally, after all these years, I had heard both. 2 months later, the house feels different. Not haunted or heavy, but alive again. Tommy has turned the sunroom into his art studio. Every morning I find him there, drawing and painting, his laughter echoing through halls that used to feel so cold. Yesterday, a letter came from Mrs. Henderson. She wrote, "The day your father realized you were the one sending money, I saw him cry for the first time in 20 years. He carried that knowledge with him until the end, and it changed him." I folded the letter and stepped onto the front porch. Tommy was sitting on the steps, sketchbook in his lap, drawing the oak trees in our yard. I looked out over the lawn, the flowers, the peaceful street. "He saw me in the end," I said to the wind. "The daughter they tried to erase was here all along. She was just waiting for love to find its way home." I was in my kitchen making my morning coffee when my phone lit up. It was a video message from Mrs. Langford, someone I hadn't heard from in forever. She used to live next door when I was growing up. Just seeing her name made old memories come rushing back. Her message was weird and short. No hello, no small talk. Just one sentence that made my heart stop. "I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't believe what I witnessed today." My hands started shaking as I opened the video. It showed the inside of a church, St. Albans, the same place my family used to drag me to every Christmas when I was a kid. The camera slowly moved toward two people standing behind a podium. It was my parents. My mom wore all black with pearls, wiping away what looked like fake tears. My dad stood there reading from a piece of paper, his hands trembling. Behind them sat a coffin, and right next to it was a huge framed photo of me surrounded by flowers. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My father's voice came through the phone speaker. "She was always a difficult child, but we loved her. We tried our best." Then my mom spoke about how I died too young and how they hoped my soul would finally be at peace. But here's the thing, I wasn't dead. I was standing right there in my apartment, very much alive. I played the video over and over, thinking maybe I was seeing things. But no, there they were, holding my funeral while I was breathing, working and living my life hundreds of miles away. They seemed calm, like they were reading lines from a script rather than mourning their daughter. My mom talked about some tragic accident that never happened. My dad mentioned how I spent my final years alone and isolated. None of it was true. They knew where I was. They knew I was alive. The video ended with shots of the crowd, distant relatives, old family friends, even my childhood piano teacher. Everyone dressed in black, everyone believing I was gone. And not a single person had tried to contact me to check if any of this was real. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some mistake or misunderstanding. They chose to do this. They decided to bury me while I was still breathing. It wasn't always this bad between us. I used to think family meant having people who would protect you and stand by you. That belief died 3 years ago when they threw me out of their lives like I was nothing. Here's what really happened. My younger sister Elena stole money from our family business. She took almost $80,000 because she was living way beyond her means and had gotten herself into serious financial trouble. When the missing money was discovered, my parents needed someone to blame. I was the perfect target. I'll never forget what my mother said to me in our kitchen that day. Better to have one ruined daughter than two. My father wouldn't even look at me when he told me I was no longer part of the family. The next morning I was gone. No money, no explanations to anyone who might ask questions. Just complete silence from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I tried everything to reach them. Phone calls, text messages, letters, nothing worked. My number was blocked. When I reached out to family friends, they suddenly stopped talking to me. Every door that had once been open was now slammed shut. I became invisible to everyone who had once known me. Eventually, I did what broken people do. I left the country, found work at a small cafe, got a new phone number and learned to live quietly. I stayed off social media and barely used my real name. But even then, I held on to a tiny bit of hope that someday someone would reach out and tell me it had all been a terrible mistake. That call never came. Instead, something much worse happened. Last year, I tried to log into my old email account, but it wouldn't work. When I contacted customer support, they told me the account had been shut down because someone had reported that the user had died. My name was officially marked as deceased in their system. They hadn't just cut me out of their lives, they had erased me completely. I couldn't sleep after watching that funeral video. Their fake tears, their scripted words, my photo next to that coffin. It all felt like a nightmare. But something told me there was more to this story, so I started investigating. First, I called my Aunt Rachel, my mom's older sister. We hadn't talked in years, but she used to slip me candy at family gatherings when I was little. She answered right away. "Hello, Aunt Rachel. It's me, it's Maya." Complete silence. Then she hung up on me. I called back, but she had already blocked my number. I tried reaching out to my cousins next. One sent me a thumbs up emoji and never responded again. Another asked if this was some kind of sick joke. Nobody believed I was really me except for one person. My youngest cousin Sam had always looked up to me when we were kids. He texted back, but he seemed scared and confused. "Maya, are you actually alive?" "Yes, I need to know what they told everyone." He took a long time to respond. Then he told me the story they had spread. I had died in a car accident while traveling overseas 3 years ago. They said it happened so far away that they couldn't bring my body home, so they had me cremated there. My heart sank. There had never been any car accident. I had never even owned a car while I was living abroad. Something inside me broke. I gathered every document I had, passport stamps, rental agreements, immigration papers. I had proof that I was alive and had never been in any accident. Then I checked the public records database online. There it was, plain as day. Maya Dequa, date of death July 16th, cause of death listed as road accident, status, deceased. They had forged my death certificate. They had made me legally dead. I stared at that screen, unable to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just about cutting me out of the family. This was a deliberate cover-up. But what were they trying to hide that was worth making me disappear forever? I should have stopped digging, but once you discover your own family has buried you alive, you need to understand why. I found my answer in the last place I expected, Elena's Instagram account. She had made it public again, and there it was. A perfect carousel of wedding photos. White roses everywhere, champagne fountains, and a diamond ring that could blind someone from space. Everyone was there celebrating Elena's big day. Aunt Rachel was smiling like she hadn't just hung up on me. My cousins were raising their glasses in toasts. Even great Uncle Theo, who never shows up to anything, had flown in from another country. But I wasn't there. Not even mentioned. Not one photo caption saying, "Wish Maya could have been here." I had been completely erased, like I never existed at all. Then I noticed something in one of the reception photos. There was my father holding a wine glass and speaking into a microphone with a huge smile on his face. The caption read, "To the one daughter who always made us proud." That's when I realized the truth. I hadn't just been forgotten, I had been replaced. Curious about what else I might find, I searched the family business records. A few clicks later, my blood turned to ice. The trust fund my grandparents had set up for me, money meant for college and starting my adult life, had been transferred to Elena 6 months after my supposed death. She didn't just mourn me. She profited from my erasure. I stared at her wedding photos, seeing her glowing in that white dress, sparkling in the sunlight, and finally understood the whole picture. My sister hadn't just taken my place in the family, she had stolen my entire existence. But they made one critical mistake. If they wanted me dead, they were about to find out just how alive I really am. I had to make them believe I was dead to expose their lies. The morning after I discovered their betrayal, I marched into a lawyer's office carrying a thick folder of evidence. Inside were passport records, work contracts, tax documents, apartment agreements, and travel receipts. Everything proved I was alive while they claimed I was dead. The young lawyer stared at me in shock. "You're fighting your own death certificate?" he asked. I slid the fake document across his desk. "I'm not dead, but I plan to make them wish they were." He nodded slowly. "We'll file fraud charges and get that death declaration cancelled." "Make it fast," I interrupted. "I have a funeral to attend this Sunday." Earlier that day, I'd gotten a mysterious text from an unknown number. Just one line: "Memorial service for you this Sunday at St. Albans Church." No signature, no explanation. But I knew exactly what this meant, and I had the perfect plan. That night, I stood by my apartment window watching the city lights twinkle below. They had buried me in lies and tried to erase my existence. But now I had a stage, and I was ready to give them a show they'd never forget. Sunday arrived, and St. Albans Church was packed. Cars lined the street like a parade of fake grief. The heavy wooden doors stayed open just long enough for mourners dressed in black to enter, hugging each other and wiping away tears. I watched from across the street, hidden behind dark sunglasses and a black coat. It felt like watching a play about someone who looked like me but wasn't really me at all. Inside, the performance had begun. Sad organ music filled the air. Candles flickered around my photograph, the same one they'd used in the fake obituary. I remembered when that photo was taken. I was genuinely happy back then. My father stood at the front, speaking in a solemn voice that carried through the church. She was troubled, but we loved her. She lost her way, and though we couldn't help her, we never stopped hoping she'd return to us. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with fancy tissues. Her crying looked rehearsed, like she'd been practicing for weeks. Then there was Elena, clutching her pearl necklace like it was keeping her heart together. Maya was complicated, but she was family. I wish I could have said goodbye. Her words were lies wrapped in fake tears. I moved closer to the door, just close enough to hear everything. The priest raised his hand. "May she rest in peace." I whispered to myself, "Not yet. The show isn't over and the star hasn't arrived." "Let us observe a moment of silence," the priest announced. Everyone stood up, bowed their heads, closed their eyes, and folded their hands over their hearts. In that perfect quiet moment, I pushed open the heavy doors. The sound cut through the silence like thunder. The oak doors groaned open and cold sunlight poured into the church, creating a dramatic spotlight down the center aisle. I stepped into that light, walking slowly and deliberately. Each step of my heels on the marble floor echoed like gunshots in the silence. The quiet shattered. People gasped. A few turned around, then more followed. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Is that her? It can't be." A child's voice cut through the tension. "Mom, isn't that her?" I removed my sunglasses. Eyes met mine, wide, shocked, terrified. My mother's face went white. Her lips trembled, and then she collapsed in what looked like a perfectly rehearsed faint. My father's mouth fell open. The wine glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the wooden bench. Elena locked eyes with me and froze. Her jaw tightened as she twisted her pearl necklace. A half-empty champagne glass tumbled from her hand, splashing across her white shoes. The priest stepped back, completely stunned. I kept walking. Every eye in the building followed me, like they couldn't decide if they were seeing a ghost or facing judgment. Maybe I was both. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My presence was the thunder that followed their lightning of lies. The consequence they prayed would never come. By the time I reached the front, the entire room was holding its breath. I turned to face everyone and smiled. Let the truth begin. I stood beneath my own portrait, the same photo they'd used to bury me. Facing the crowd, I cleared my throat and spoke into the heavy silence. I heard I died, but I'm here to set the record straight. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Some people had phones in their hands but forgot to even blink, let alone record anything. There was no accident. No tragic car crash overseas. No closed casket because the body was too damaged. I pulled out my thick folder, stamped with official government seals and international dates. These are my passport stamps, work records, tax documents, and apartment leases. I've been alive. I've been working. I've been surviving. The only thing I lost was them. I turned to my parents. They told the world I died. They faked the paperwork and filed a death certificate. Once I was legally gone, I shifted my gaze to Elena, who stood frozen with her fingers clenched around her pearls. They transferred everything to her. My trust fund, my inheritance, my entire life. Elena opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't let her. Don't worry about explaining. Just enjoy the house you bought with my money. Murmurs rose like distant thunder. Someone whispered, "She has proof." Another person gasped. Then a phone lifted up, red recording light blinking. Someone was filming. Perfect. Let the world see this funeral for what it really was. Not a goodbye, but a cover-up. You didn't lose a daughter, I said, staring directly at my father. You threw her away. And now you get to watch her walk back in. The lies had turned to ashes and I had just struck the match. I turned one last time. My father's face was pale. My mother still trembled in her seat. Elena looked hollow and defeated, no pearls left to clutch. You buried me to protect yourselves, I said calmly. But I came back to haunt you with the truth. No more shouting. No more lies. Just heavy, final silence as I walked toward the exit. As I left, the church bells began to ring. How perfect funeral bells. But this time they weren't ringing for me. Later, I handed all the documents to my lawyer and signed the final papers. I watched as they tore up the fake death certificate. My legal resurrection was official. An investigation opened into fraud, false reporting, and theft. Let them try to lie their way out of this one. Sometimes you have to die in their world to be reborn in your own. And this time I wasn't coming back for forgiveness. I was coming back for my freedom. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I could hear my dad's voice cracking as he spoke those words that would change everything. The meal didn't arrive. 20 family members sat around an elegantly set table, staring at empty dishes. The beautiful decorations now seemed to mock what should have been a celebration. From my cozy apartment 30 minutes away, I stirred my warm drink and listened. My Aunt Sarah's confused voice drifted through the background chatter. I could picture the exact moment it all clicked for her. With complete calm, I responded, "Oh really? I figured you had everything handled without me." The quiet that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Then came the whispered conversations. My mom's panicked voice broke through. What is she talking about? The confusion was spreading. This was the same family who had shut me out but had no problem letting me foot the bill weeks earlier. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 38 years old, the oldest child who somehow became the family's personal assistant, counselor, and ATM machine all rolled into one. Holiday gatherings had always meant everything to our family. Not because of love or warmth, but because of the perfect image we had to maintain. Growing up, I learned early that I wasn't really a daughter, I was more like hired help. While my younger brother and sister got all the attention and praise, I was the one organizing everyone's schedules, taking care of scraped knees, and making sure homework got done. College felt like my chance to finally be treated as an equal. I was wrong about that too. The betrayal hit me like a truck just 1 week before our big family dinner. My aunt posted in our group chat about how excited she was to see everyone. I replied saying I couldn't wait either. Hours of silence followed. Then my cousin reached out privately with a message that stopped my heart cold. "Wait, you're actually planning to come? Your parents told everyone you weren't invited this year." I felt sick. I immediately called my mother, completely confused. She danced around the truth before finally admitting, "We're keeping it small this time. Just close family." "I am close family," I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. We just thought it would be less complicated this way. You know, avoid any awkwardness. There hadn't been any awkwardness. Unless she meant the times I finally started saying no when they asked me to pay for my brother's car repairs or when I refused to bail out my sister after her wedding expenses got out of control. I did some digging. Everyone else had gotten invitations. My siblings, their partners, even distant relatives I barely knew. Everyone except me. What they forgot was that while I might have been banned from their table, I was still the one who had paid for their feast. It took me a while to realize the full impact of what they'd done. My dad had asked me to help with the meal costs, but I hadn't just helped, I had covered everything. The main course, all the side dishes, the desserts. I had personally placed orders at Henderson's Fine Meats, where my mother always shopped, and Golden Spoon Bakery, famous for their award-winning pies. Everything was ordered under my name and credit card. They didn't just exclude me. They used me. I made 2 quick phone calls. The butcher processed my cancellation immediately. The bakery hesitated at first but agreed when I showed them my receipt. Then I sat back and waited, knowing exactly how this would play out. The holiday arrived. At 12:30 in the afternoon, my phone started ringing with my dad's name. I let it ring several times before answering. The food never showed up, he said, his voice mixing panic with confusion. I could hear the chaos in the background. Worried voices, sharp whispers, my mother's stressed tone cutting through it all. I tilted my head and put on my most concerned voice. Oh no. Did you check with whoever was supposed to handle the order? You were handling the order, he snapped back. Was I? I let the silence stretch out, making it sting just enough. Well, I assumed you had everything under control without me. He didn't respond. An hour later, my cousin painted the perfect picture through text. No main course, no desserts. Every grocery store and restaurant in town was either closed or completely sold out. My sister had brought her new boyfriend to impress the family. She ended up locked in the bedroom crying. My mother hid in the bathroom. My father sat there speechless while my uncle loudly asked, "Didn't Sarah say she was bringing the turkey?" The room went dead quiet. Then the whispers started spreading. 3 days later came a group text from Mom, "We really missed having you there. Let's move forward from this." Not an apology. Just a suggestion to sweep everything under the rug like always. I didn't respond. My aunt called the next day. "Several of us had words with your parents," she said quietly. They needed to hear some hard truths. But my mother hated facing consequences. By the end of that week, a completely different story started making the rounds. Now I was unstable, dramatic, and had deliberately ruined everyone's holiday. My dad called multiple times before I finally picked up. "I don't know what point you were trying to make," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "But you humiliated your mother." I laughed out loud. Funny, since she didn't even want me there in the first place. His dramatic sigh followed. "We made an error, okay? But what you did was cruel. More cruel than uninviting your own daughter after she paid for everything. You should have spoken up sooner." "You're overreacting," he said, like that would make me back down. It really wasn't that serious. My heart was pounding. It was serious to me. "Not that serious," I shot back. "Then why are you calling me about it, Dad?" I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. My whole body was buzzing with anger and grief. That night, my cousin texted, "You just started a family war." Apparently, my mother was already spinning her version of events. How I'd always been difficult and this just proved her point. The winter holidays were approaching like a storm cloud. I had zero plans to show up. That changed when my aunt called with disturbing news. "She's telling everyone you're too fragile to be around family," she said carefully. "That you're skipping the holidays because you can't handle confrontation. And your dad is claiming he tried to make things right, but you're being stubborn." I gripped the phone until my knuckles went white. They weren't going to rewrite my story. Winter holiday evening, I showed up fashionably late to my parents' house. The moment I walked through the door, it was like someone had pressed pause on a movie. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. My mother's face froze. My father stopped drinking his whiskey mid-sip. My sister stared like she'd seen a ghost. "Hey everyone," I said casually, unwrapping my scarf with a smile. "Happy holidays." My mother found her voice first. "Oh, you decided to come." "Of course," I replied sweetly. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Then I stepped aside to reveal my surprise guest. My grandmother. My mother's mother. My mother's face went completely white. Years ago, they'd had a terrible falling out. My mom had tried to erase her from our lives completely, but I never stopped staying in touch. Grandma had been horrified when she heard about the dinner disaster. When I asked if she wanted to join us for the holidays, she didn't even hesitate. "Oh my," Grandma said, stepping inside with exaggerated amazement. "It's been so long since I've been in this beautiful home. What lovely decorations you have." My mother looked like she might pass out. Dinner was perfectly tense. Grandma picked at her food and said brightly, "Oh, is this from the store? It has that very consistent taste." I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing. A week later, strange messages started coming from cousins and extended family. "Heard there was some confusion. Are you doing okay?" Others were more direct. "Didn't think you had that kind of fight in you." My aunt filled me in on what was happening. "Your mom is telling everyone you had some kind of mental breakdown," she said with a sigh. "That you're not stable. That what you did at the holidays proved it." I let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable, but not surprising. My mother had taught me that truth is dangerous to people who need to control everything. The realization hit me hard. My mother wasn't just embarrassed, she felt threatened. I had exposed her, and now she was rewriting history to make me look unstable. If she could discredit me, she wouldn't have to face the truth. She wouldn't have to admit she was wrong. I called my grandmother. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "Unfortunately," she sighed, "your mother has been calling around saying she's worried about you, that you're not mentally well." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You know that's not true, right?" "My dear," she said, her voice suddenly firm, "I knew it wasn't true before she even started talking." That night, I sat on my couch, lit only by my holiday tree lights, and typed a message to the family group chat. "Hey everyone, just wanted to clear up any confusion. I'm doing great. No breakdowns, no drama. It's been an interesting holiday season, but I'm genuinely in a good place. Hope you all are too. Wishing everyone a wonderful new year." Short, neutral, impossible to twist. The digital equivalent of smiling and waving while my mother's lies crumbled. Then something unexpected happened. My brother Mike texted me, "Hey, can we talk?" We hadn't spoken in months. I called him immediately, heart racing. His voice came through uncertain, softer than I remembered. "Look, I don't agree with what Mom did." I was shocked. "You don't?" "She's really good at twisting situations," he admitted. The dinner felt wrong. But the holidays, that's when everything became clear. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. I didn't say anything because, well, you know how she gets. Yeah, I said gently. I know. He paused. I'm not saying I handled it right, but I don't think you're crazy. Not even close. My throat tightened. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until tears started forming. Something had shifted. First my aunt, then my grandmother, now Mike. My mother's grip was loosening. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. I almost ignored it, but curiosity and old wounds made me answer. Hello. Her voice was ice cold. We need to meet in person. About what? A pause. Your little performance humiliated me. There it was. Not, hurt me. Not, let's talk about what happened. Just, humiliated me. Still all about appearances. Sunday dinner, 6 o'clock, she said curtly. Your father and I expect you there. Then she hung up. I almost didn't go, but my aunt convinced me. Just hear them out, she urged. You don't have to forgive them, but make them say it to your face. So on Sunday evening, I drove back to my parents' house. The tension hit me the moment I entered the dining room. It was heavy, almost suffocating. My dad stood stiffly near the table, hands clasped too tightly. My mom sat at the head like a judge, arms crossed, mouth set in a hard line, eyes sharp with anger. My sister pretended to be absorbed in her phone. My brother Mike sat on the edge of his seat, glancing nervously between everyone. Mom exhaled hard. Do you have any idea what you've done? I tilted my head. Which part upset you? Canceling the meal, bringing grandma to dinner, or the fact that people stopped believing your version of events? You're so overdramatic, she spat. Dad stepped in, his voice low but tense. Your mother is hurt, and you've done nothing but make her look bad. She made herself look bad, I replied calmly. I just stopped covering for her. Mom's face flushed red. The truth. You mean your version of events? Because in my version, you abandoned your family, refused to move on, and took revenge over a simple misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. The word cracked through the air. You didn't invite me. You let me pay for everything and then acted like I didn't exist. We never meant to exclude you, she snapped. We thought it would be easier, less drama, and then you made it 10 times worse. You told people I was mentally unstable. You tried to destroy my reputation. You embarrassed me, she shot back, in front of everyone. Then Mike spoke up. Mom, he said quietly but firmly, you did exclude her. You told everyone she wasn't coming. You let her pay for everything. That was wrong. She turned toward him, eyes flashing. Oh, don't you start too. But Mike didn't back down. No, you crossed a line. You always do when you feel cornered. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We should have handled it differently. Mom narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? He hesitated. Maybe she has a point. The room went silent, but I wasn't finished. You didn't just leave me out, I said. You tried to paint me as unstable. You called relatives and said I was having a breakdown. Why, Mom? And then she said it, because I was embarrassed. Complete silence fell. She blinked like she hadn't even realized the truth until it spilled out. I didn't know what to tell people when they asked. It got out of hand. I didn't want to be the bad guy. So you made me the bad guy. I said quietly. She didn't answer. Beside her, for the first time in my life, I saw my father look at her like he didn't recognize the woman sitting there. Mike sat still, jaw clenched. Across the table, my sister, quiet until now, muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable." Just like that, the truth settled over the room like thick fog. The lies, the manipulation, the selfishness, all of it exposed and undeniable. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother clearly. Not as an untouchable authority figure, not as some all-powerful force, just a woman so terrified of being wrong that she would rather destroy her own daughter than admit her mistakes. I stood up. "I'm done," I said, steady and sure. "I don't need an apology because I don't think you're capable of giving a real one. But I need you to understand that I'm done." My mother flinched like I'd slapped her. "Wait, no. You don't get to walk away like that. You did this," I said firmly. "You shut me out. And when people noticed, you rewrote the story. You made me the villain because you couldn't handle the truth." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I turned to my father. "I appreciate that you tried, but you let it happen. And that hurt too." He didn't respond. Just looked down at his hands. I looked at my siblings. My sister's face was tight with guilt. "I should have said something sooner," she said softly. Mike gave a quiet nod. "Me too." It didn't fix anything, but it mattered. In the weeks that followed, I created distance. Mom sent shallow texts, "Can we move past this?" I left them unanswered. My aunt checked in regularly, her support unwavering. Grandma sent a handwritten letter full of warmth, telling me how proud she was that I stood up for myself. But the real surprise came from Mike. One evening in mid-January, he texted, "Want to grab coffee?" We met at a quiet cafe and ended up talking for nearly 3 hours. "I think I spent so long trying to keep the peace," he said, "I didn't realize how much damage she was doing." "Yeah," I replied softly. "I get it." In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. If you've ever been the scapegoat in your own family, the one who sees the problems while everyone else clings to the illusion, then you know this feeling. The constant questioning, the heartbreak of being told you're the problem just for setting boundaries. You've heard it all, that never happened. You're too sensitive. Stop making everything about you. Standing up to that pattern isn't easy. It's terrifying. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't forgive. It's refuse to play your assigned role. The empty chair at their next holiday table won't be my shame. It will be my peace. If you're still nodding along, maybe it's time to ask yourself which relationships in your life are nourishing you, and which ones are just keeping you starved for love you'll never receive. If you've ever been silenced, sidelined, or labeled for standing your ground, share your story in the comments. Support matters. Protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. Choose respect over obligation. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe. This journey might be over, but yours may just be beginning. Walking into the Morrison family's yearly meeting felt surreal. The conference room sat at the top of their Chicago tower, with huge windows showing the entire city below. I hadn't been in this building for 7 years. Back then, I was just 25, fresh from business school with degrees in accounting and operations management. That was the same day my uncle, Robert Morrison, turned down my job application in front of everyone. Today, I walked back in as founder of Phoenix Solutions, secretly Morrison Industries' biggest customer. We send them over $50 million every year through their shipping department. They had no clue it was me behind it all. Our latest quarterly numbers look amazing, my cousin Jake said, flipping through his fancy presentation slides. Most of our success comes from our top client, Phoenix Solutions. I took a sip of my coffee to hide my smile. I could still hear Jake's words from 7 years ago. Listen, Emma, you're bright, but this isn't really your world. We value family tradition and bloodlines here. Robert nodded approvingly. Great work, Jake. This is exactly why we keep the business in the family. In the family. I looked down at my tablet, checking the real numbers I'd gotten from someone inside their company. Jake had been lying about their performance for almost 2 years. Hiding losses, covering up problems. The only reason Morrison Industries was still running was because of my company's deals. Emma, a quiet voice called out. Robert's secretary, Sarah, pointed toward the meeting room doors. They're ready for your presentation now. I stood up, smoothing my black business suit. It was perfectly fitted and professional, nothing like the cheap outfit I wore when I begged for a job here years ago. Back then, Robert said I didn't have the right look for the Morrison family business. As I walked to the front, Jake's voice cut through the room. Emma, what are you doing here? This is a private board meeting. I looked around the long wooden table, making eye contact with each confused face. I'm here representing Phoenix Solutions. We need to discuss some changes to our contracts before we renew them. The room went completely silent. Robert squinted at me. That's not how we do things. Phoenix always sends someone from their external team. I smiled calmly. They do. And you're looking right at her. Dead silence. Jake looked like he'd stopped breathing. My cousin Lisa dropped her pen. You could see the truth slowly hitting them. That can't be right, Robert said, his voice shaking. You run some tiny company. We checked your background thoroughly. I tapped my screen and put up my own presentation. That tiny company was just a cover. Phoenix Solutions, which used to be called Apex Consulting, belongs to me. I've owned it for 7 years now. People gasped around the room. Just like that, the girl they rejected had become the woman keeping their business alive. My first slide showed everything clearly. Phoenix Solutions verified financial records. We make 3 times more money than Morrison Industries each year. We have offices in 15 countries. Our reach makes their local business look tiny. Our client list includes 12 major Fortune 500 companies. I heard someone gasp loudly. No way, Jake jumped up, looking sick. That's impossible. You can't be. Can't be what? I asked, keeping my voice steady. The same woman you laughed at during the company party. The niece who wasn't Morrison enough. Or the owner of the company that's currently keeping you from going bankrupt. Whispers started spreading across the room. We would have known, Jake insisted desperately. Would you really? I raised an eyebrow. The same way you knew about the $12 million you've been hiding through fake inventory reports and delayed income statements. His face went white. Board members turned to each other, talking urgently under their breath. I've spent 7 years building Phoenix Solutions into what it is today, I said calmly. While you all celebrated keeping me out of your inner circle, I was quietly becoming the reason you still have a business. Robert's hands gripped his chair so tight his knuckles turned white. Why are you telling us this now? I clicked to my next slide. It showed how much Morrison Industries depended on Phoenix. The numbers were brutal. 75% of their shipping income, 60% of their new business growth, and more than half of their client relationships all came through systems Phoenix controlled. Because it's time to renegotiate, I said. And after what I've discovered, I'm not sure there's much of your company left to save. You can't just leave us, Jake said, panic in his voice. Those contracts expire in 3 business days, I interrupted. And as CEO of Phoenix, I have serious doubts about Morrison Industries' financial health. Your financial health, cousin. The room exploded into chaos. Board members started demanding answers. Robert glared at Jake with pure anger. Lisa mumbled something about legal problems. I stayed perfectly calm and still. Let them deal with the storm they created. I'm calling an emergency review meeting tomorrow morning at 8, I announced, collecting my tablet and papers. My team will show you a complete breakdown of your real financial situation. I suggest you come prepared to explain yourselves. This is just revenge, Jake accused, his voice trembling. Because we didn't give you the job you wanted. I stopped at the doorway. The memory of that rejection 7 years ago was still fresh. His smug expression, Robert's cold stare, the laughter that followed as I left with my dignity intact but my heart broken. No, Jake, I said, looking him straight in the eye. This isn't revenge. This is business. The same thing you said I'd never be good at. I checked my watch. 8 sharp tomorrow. Don't be late. Though being on time was never your strong suit, was it? As I walked into the hallway, I could hear the voices behind me turn into arguments. Robert's calm mask was cracking. Jake was desperately trying to defend his fake numbers. My assistant, David, was waiting by the elevator with a bottle of sparkling water. How did it go? He asked. Exactly like we planned, I replied, stepping inside. If you think that meeting was satisfying, wait until you see what happens at tomorrow's review. Make sure you don't miss how this all ends. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. Is everything set for tomorrow? I asked. Complete audit reports, full breakdown of Jake's financial tricks, and a dependency analysis that'll make them sick to their stomachs, David replied with a satisfied grin. They won't know what hit them. I thought about Uncle Robert's face when reality finally sank in. About Jake, panicked and pale, trying to defend numbers that were never real. About all the years they whispered behind my back, saying I wasn't right for the Morrison legacy, that I lacked the proper background, that I didn't belong. Send me the latest version of the contract cancellation letter, I told David. I want to review it before tomorrow. Are you really going to end all the deals? He asked. I smiled. Let's just say they're about to learn what real power looks like. Tomorrow they'll understand what actual business success means. The next morning, I got to Morrison Industries an hour early. Same building that once rejected me. The lobby security guard, same person from 7 years ago, stood up so fast he almost spilled his coffee. Good morning, welcome back, he said nervously. The board is already gathering upstairs. Early birds, I said quietly. Funny how the smell of disaster motivates people. As I rode the executive elevator up, the polished metal showed my reflection. Someone they never saw coming. The woman they pushed away was about to decide their future. The boardroom was packed when I walked in. Complete silence filled the air. Robert sat at the head of the table, looking defeated. Jake sat hunched next to their lawyers, surrounded by stress and denial. Independent board members were already whispering, looking worried as they read printed summaries. Behind me, my team of financial experts walked in. All carefully chosen, all quietly gathering information for the past 5 years while the Morrison heirs played family politics games. I stood at the front of the room. Good morning, I said smoothly. Shall we start? Emma, Robert said, his voice lacking its usual authority. Before we begin, maybe we could talk privately first. I tilted my head slightly. I think we've had enough private family talks, don't you think? I nodded to my team. Please hand out the reports. Papers rustled like leaves in a storm. Then came the sharp sounds of shock. One board member cursed under his breath. "This can't be accurate," muttered a director, flipping through pages frantically. "These losses, these numbers." "Oh, they're completely accurate," I confirmed, pulling up my presentation. "Let's start with the creative bookkeeping, shall we?" I looked directly at Jake. "Would you like to explain how over $12 million in losses got hidden under miscellaneous business expenses?" His lawyer started to object, but I held up my hand. "Or should we skip ahead to the inflated client numbers, the fake assets, or the part where Morrison Industries is basically broke without Phoenix Solutions contracts?" "You're trying to destroy us," Jake said, his voice cracking. I stared at him without blinking. "No, Jake, you destroyed yourselves. I just uncovered it." "Your own family," Jake choked out. "Family?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean when you told everyone in the industry I wasn't cut out for business leadership? Or when Uncle Robert laughed and said I'd never understand real commerce?" "That was 7 years ago," Robert said quickly. "Yes, it was," I replied. "And while you were busy protecting the family name and polishing old traditions, I was building something from nothing. Today, Phoenix Solutions is 3 times bigger than Morrison Industries." I clicked to the next slide. Numbers don't lie. A chart showed exactly how deep their dependence went. 62% of your income comes directly from Phoenix, I said evenly. "Income that disappears next Tuesday if I cancel our agreement." The room erupted. Voices talking over each other, chairs scraping, lawyers huddling in panic. One board member actually swore out loud. Then Jake completely broke down. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad," he mumbled, slumping in his chair. "You can't just walk away, Emma." Robert stood up, his face red with anger. "We'll take you to court." "On what grounds?" I asked, my voice turning ice cold. "That your rejected niece outperformed your entire management team. That your son's fake reporting got discovered before the government found out." I leaned forward. "Please, let your lawyers question Jake under oath. I'd love for them to explain the hidden debts and phantom revenue streams." A gray-haired board member cleared his throat. "Miss Chen, given these circumstances, we might need to discuss immediate leadership changes." "Leadership changes," Jake's voice cracked. "This is our family's company." "Actually," I said, sliding a sealed envelope onto the table. "Not for much longer." Inside were 2 options. Option 1, I explained. Morrison Industries agrees to complete restructuring. Jake steps down. The board brings in independent leadership. We continue a smaller partnership with strict oversight. And option 2, Robert asked quietly. I walk away, every contract gone, and my legal team sends our findings to federal investigators. I checked my watch. "You have 1 hour to decide." "This isn't business," Jake spat. "It's revenge." "No, cousin," I said quietly. "It's exactly what you always said. Business is ruthless, merit-based, and only for people who can prove they deserve to be there." I gathered my tablet, my notes, my composure. "I'll be waiting in the office you once said I'd never earn," I added. "The CEO's suite. Amazing how things work out." I left them there, surrounded by reports, evidence, and panic. By the time I reached the executive suite overlooking the lake, my phone was buzzing constantly. Mom calling. "How could you do this to your uncle?" Dad texting. "You're destroying the family." My cousin's messaging. "You've ruined everything." I ignored them all. Instead, I opened an old email buried deep in my inbox. The rejection letter Robert had sent me 7 years ago. Dear Emma, while we appreciate your interest, we believe you lack the management skills needed at Morrison Industries. Perhaps a position with fewer responsibilities would better match your abilities. Sincerely, Robert Morrison. I smiled and clicked delete. Then I printed out the old rejection email and placed it on what would soon be my new desk. The board, now facing undeniable proof of Jake's fraudulent reporting and the company's complete reliance on Phoenix Solutions, had only one smart choice. Accept my terms or lose everything. By evening, it was finished. Jake resigned, his exit as quiet as it was long overdue. Robert, stripped of his power, was pushed into early retirement that nobody tried to prevent. And Morrison Industries, once a fortress of family privilege and old money arrogance, would be rebuilt under my supervision. The family empire they once said I wasn't qualified to join would now answer to me. David walked in just as the final documents were signed, carrying a bottle of chilled champagne. "Congratulations," he said with a big smile, "on your very smooth takeover." "Not a takeover," I replied, watching through the window as Jake and Robert quietly packed their offices into boxes. "Just business. The kind they told me I'd never master." My phone buzzed again. Dozens of unread messages. Mom texting that I didn't need to embarrass them. Dad saying this isn't how family handles problems. Cousins writing that we grew up together, how could I do this? I typed one message to the family group chat and sent it. "Don't worry about the family reputation. Morrison Industries is finally in capable hands." Then I put the phone down and turned back to the window, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. As darkness fell over the city, a different kind of peace came over me. Not the peace of getting approval or recognition, but the satisfaction of earned success. Because sometimes winning isn't about getting the job you begged for. It's about building something so impressive that they have no choice but to sit across from you and negotiate. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming their boss. Robert had been right about one thing, though. I wasn't qualified to work at Morrison Industries. I was qualified to own it. You know what? Before we talk about anything else, how was your day today? Really? I know we don't always check in with each other, especially when life moves so fast, but I genuinely want to know. Drop a comment below. Good day, bad day, somewhere in between. I'm here to listen, because sometimes just being heard is the first step to feeling valued. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, I want to thank you. Not just for listening, but for walking through every hard-earned lesson alongside me. When I was told I wasn't good enough for their table, I didn't fight for a chair. I built my own table, and eventually they had no choice but to stand around mine. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated, overlooked, or shut out by people who should have supported you? Tell me how you kept pushing forward anyway. Or tell me where you are right now in your journey, and I'll cheer you on like nobody else did. Because here's what I've learned. Quiet determination makes the biggest impact. If any part of this story spoke to you, hit that subscribe button. Not just to support my channel, but to support yourself. Because stories like this aren't just about payback or power moves. They're about finding your voice, recognizing your worth, and rewriting your place in the world. Here's what I know for sure. You don't need permission to start. You don't need approval to succeed. And you definitely don't need anyone's blessing to become who you were always meant to be. So go ahead. Delete that rejection. Build what they said you couldn't. And when they finally notice you, make sure it's because you refuse to give up. Until next time, I'll be right here sharing stories like mine and waiting to hear yours. Because sometimes the greatest success story begins with someone telling you no, and you turning that into unstoppable power. The fancy invitation showed up on a wet Thursday morning. Heavy paper with dark blue writing that screamed expensive. My family was throwing their yearly get-together in Boston, and somehow my name made it onto the guest list. I'm Sarah Whitmore, but in my business world, everyone knows me as Sam Rivera. 17 years back, I was the family letdown. The one who said no to a job at the family company to chase my dream of planning events in Chicago. They called me crazy, said I had no future. My phone rang, and I saw my cousin Lisa's name pop up. "Hey Sarah," she said in that fake sweet voice I knew too well. "You got the invitation, right?" I told her I did. She cleared her throat and said this year's party was going to be really fancy. "The grand ballroom is super exclusive," she said. "You know what I mean, right?" I looked out my office window at the New York skyline. I had to hold back a laugh. The grand ballroom was mine, but my family had no clue. "Are you saying I don't fit in, Lisa?" I asked. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she giggled back. "We're just having some important people there. Politicians, business owners, maybe even some celebrities. Image matters, you know." What she really meant was they didn't want their old failure ruining their fancy night. "So who picked this place?" I asked. "Me," she said proudly. "Dad said I have great taste for classy venues. The Grand Ballroom is the best in Boston. It took some serious connections to book it. Those connections were just emails through my client system, personally approved by me with a huge markup." "Sounds like a lot of work," I said calmly. "Oh, you have no idea," she went on. "The owner, Sam Rivera, is super private, but the staff treated us like royalty when they heard it was for the Whitmores. Of course they did. I had told my team to give them the royal treatment. Anyway," Lisa continued, "I'm sure you get it. Maybe next year when you've moved up from that little bed and breakfast you started in Chicago. That little place had launched my entire business empire. But sure, Lisa. Maybe next year." She kept calling it just a tiny inn, not knowing it was the first step in building my luxury event company. But my family stopped caring about my life a long time ago. "Something like that," I replied coolly. After I hung up, I sat back in my leather chair. The sounds of Manhattan traffic were muffled by my thick windows. Old memories started flooding back. 17 years ago, I graduated from college with a degree in event planning. I was full of dreams but had zero support from my family. "You plan parties for a living," my dad had yelled at me. "No, Whitmore serves other people." But I did serve. I planned, I worked, I carried heavy boxes, I coordinated everything. I didn't just want to throw parties. I wanted to change how events were done. To do that, I needed to learn everything from the bottom up. Within 4 years, I opened my first venue called Riverside Inn. It was booked solid months ahead. Now at 34, I own 20 premium venues and resorts in 6 different countries. The Grand Ballroom they picked for their reunion was my crown jewel. It mixed old Boston charm with modern design. It had won Best Venue awards twice. Yet somehow my family thought it was too good for me. My phone buzzed again. It was Marcus, my assistant. "The contract for the Whitmore party is ready. Need your approval. Want me to bring it up?" I typed back with a smile. "No need. I have something special planned." I opened my laptop and pulled up the event plans. If they thought I didn't belong, they were about to learn what exclusion really felt like. When the outsider controls everything, every single detail goes through my hands. The lighting, the wine selection, the timing of speeches, even the air freshener in the bathrooms. I was creating an experience they'd never forget. I remembered all the times they made me sit with the catering staff at family events. Or when Lisa accidentally seated me next to the cleaning crew at her wedding, saying it was more my level. I was already running 2 companies by then. They never asked about my work. Never even looked me up online. Only my younger brother Jake ever kept in touch. He called right as I finished the final plans. "Sarah," he said gently. "Lisa told me she asked you not to come." "I'm really sorry about that." "Don't be sorry," I said, signing the last document with a flourish. "Actually, I could use your help. Can you make sure everyone shows up right at 7? "Why? What's happening?" "Let's just say the Whitmores aren't the only ones with connections in this city." The 2 weeks before the reunion flew by fast. I was involved in every detail, even approving the color of the flowers. If they wanted luxury, I was about to give them a masterclass. My family loved showing off. They were about to be part of a very different kind of show. The night before the party, I walked through the marble halls of the grand ballroom, watching the final setup. The crystal chandeliers sparkled, the decorative molding gleamed, and the floors shined like mirrors. Every detail was perfect. Marcus walked up with his tablet. "Everything's ready. The big reveal is set for 7:15. Are you sure about this?" I didn't hesitate. I thought about every fake laugh, every cold shoulder, every time they dismissed me. "Absolutely. It's not every day you get to host your whole family in your own place." I smiled, already picturing their faces. At exactly 6:45 the next evening, I stood alone in the private viewing room upstairs, sipping champagne while watching the security cameras. They arrived like a parade of wealth. Designer purses swinging, expensive suits gleaming, air kisses all around. Everyone desperate to impress each other. They had no idea who was about to impress them, and they definitely weren't ready for what came next. Lisa strutted in wearing a red designer dress, giving orders like she owned the place. She posed by the main staircase, trying to get the perfect photos. My father's black luxury car pulled up next, followed by an endless line of expensive cars carrying aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen since they labeled me the family disappointment. "Everything's ready," Marcus said, checking his tablet. "Staff is in position. Want security nearby?" I shook my head. No need. The Whitmores wouldn't dare mess up their own classy image. I straightened my dark gray suit. Custom-made and expensive. Not that anyone downstairs would believe the family failure now had a wardrobe worth more than all their clothes combined. "Let them get comfortable," I said. "The real show is about to begin." Inside the grand ballroom, the reunion buzzed with champagne and fake laughter. Lisa floated around the fountain, bragging about her exclusive connections that got them the venue. My father shook hands with old business partners, probably lying about his investments. My cousins took selfies by the ballroom's branded backdrop, like the prestige could somehow transfer to them. At 7:10 sharp, the ballroom's manager approached Lisa. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm very sorry. There's a small issue about tonight's event." Lisa's practiced smile cracked. "What are you talking about?" "I arranged everything through your main office." "Yes, ma'am," the manager said politely. "It's just that the owner requested some special touches for tonight." Lisa let out a condescending laugh. "The owner? Please. Rivera is too important to bother with small details." A quiet hush spread across the ballroom like wildfire as I walked out from the back. "Actually," I said calmly, "Sam Rivera is very hands-on with her properties." Every head turned. The once ignored cousin now stood front and center in the most elite venue in Boston, dressed in a suit worth more than Lisa's entire jewelry collection. "Sarah," my father's voice broke the silence. "What are you doing here?" Lisa hissed, desperate to take back control. "She told me I wasn't welcome," I said coolly, taking a few steps forward. "Didn't want me embarrassing the family, right?" Lisa's cheeks turned bright red. "This is a private party. You need to leave." "No," I said, smiling. "I really don't." Marcus, standing quietly by the media control, tapped his tablet screen. The huge LED screen behind the stage lit up. First, the ballroom's logo appeared. Then in big, clear text, "Owned and operated by Sarah Rivera, formerly Whitmore, founder and CEO of Rivera Luxury Events." Gasps echoed through the room. Someone dropped their champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor. Lisa stood frozen, mouth hanging open. "That can't be real." I pulled out a sleek leather wallet and casually opened it. "Would you like a business card?" I asked sweetly. "Or maybe you'd prefer to see the property deed." I gave the wallet a gentle tap for emphasis. My father took a shaky step forward, his voice cracking. "You own this place?" "This one and 17 others," I nodded, "including that little inn you made fun of. The small project that started a luxury empire." Old hurts flashed through my mind. Being pushed aside, ignored, laughed at behind my back. But tonight wasn't about being bitter. It was about finding peace. "All these years," I said quietly, my voice carrying through the shocked silence. "You were too busy looking down on me to see what I was building." I looked directly at Lisa. "That modest inn you joked about. That was my testing ground, my practice run. The foundation of an empire you're now standing inside." Marcus stepped forward, placing elegant folders into the hands of key family members. "These," he announced, "contain a welcome letter from Miss Rivera and tonight's detailed bill." Inside each folder was the truth. A company profile of Rivera Luxury Events, newspaper articles, awards, and a polite but expensive invoice for the entire evening, charged at premium rates. Lisa's hands shook as she opened hers. I smiled peacefully. This was my legacy, and they had just walked right into it. Lisa grabbed her folder, flipping through it with trembling hands. Her eyes went wide. "This price is way above normal rates." "About 50% above," I confirmed lightly. "Call it a family discount. Think of it as interest on what you owed me." From the back of the room, Jake let out a quiet laugh. A few others joined in, hesitant at first, then more freely as the tension started to break. My father's mouth formed a tight line. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I met his eyes steadily. "Would you have listened?" He said nothing. None of them did. But in that long silence, I heard every unspoken regret. 17 years ago, I said clearly, you told me no daughter of yours would ever wait tables, clean rooms, or serve people like a servant. I smiled, letting the pause stretch out. Well, you were half right. I paused again. I don't serve tables. I own them. Across the ballroom, every digital screen lit up at once, showing sweeping images from Rivera Luxury's properties around the world. The beautiful beachfront villas in Greece, the sleek glass towers in Japan, the candlelit banquet halls of France. Our newest 5-star resort opening in Thailand, its rooftop gardens glowing against the night sky. For tonight's event, I added smoothly, your reservations are still good. You're welcome to stay. In fact, I've arranged personal tours of the ballroom. I think it's time you all saw what a career in hospitality actually looks like. Lisa took a shaky step toward me, her polished facade crumbling. Sarah, we didn't mean to. I lifted my hand, cutting her off gently but firmly. Yes, you did. Every cold shoulder, every mean comment, every time you made sure I knew I wasn't one of you. I turned to address the entire room now, my voice steady and strong. But while you were busy protecting appearances, I was busy building a future. Welcome to the ballroom. There was a low murmur. Some faces looked guilty, some embarrassed. A few, just a few, looked almost proud. My staff will show you to your upgraded rooms, I continued, smiling. Although, Lisa, I said with a slight tilt of my head, due to some unexpected VIP guests, your room had to be moved to one of our cozy standard rooms. The same type of room she once made fun of when mocking my hotel work. Her cheeks burned red. Slowly, the family filtered out, following uniformed staff toward the elevators. Some whispered, some avoided looking at me completely. Only my father stayed behind. I was wrong, he said, his voice rough and quiet. About you, about everything. I studied him. The once powerful figure now seemed strangely small under the grand chandeliers. Yes, I said softly. You were. He hesitated. Is there any way to make this right? I let the moment hang there before answering. Well, I said lightly, the good thing about owning 18 venues is I have plenty of presidential suites. Take your pick. Stay a while. Think about it. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. You always were stronger than the rest of us. No, I replied. I just worked harder. I started at the bottom when none of you would even look down. Later that night, after the last tour ended and the last glass was cleaned up, I stood in the penthouse suite overlooking Boston Harbor. Marcus entered quietly, holding a folder. Final numbers for tonight, he said. And your family seems a lot less arrogant now. I laughed, feeling a lightness in my chest I didn't know I was carrying. Amazing what a little humility and a downgrade to a city view room can do, I said, opening the file. He hesitated. Are you going to tell them about Thailand? I smiled. Or France. Or the private investment deal closing next month. I looked at the stack of contracts waiting on my desk, each one bigger than the last. Not yet, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. Let's save some surprises for later. I leaned against the glass wall, looking out over the sparkling city lights. Success, I realized, was never about getting revenge. It was about building a life so strong, so beautiful that no one's approval could ever make or break it. The best kind of victory was simply living it. It was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. And sometimes the sweetest kind of payback isn't cold at all. It's warm, elegant, served with a rooftop breakfast and a view that takes your breath away. My phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. Can we talk tomorrow, please? I smiled, typing back a simple line. Your breakfast reservation is at 9. I own that restaurant too. There was power in keeping things simple. Not just in the wealth, the buildings, or the awards, but in finally being seen for who I truly was. Not the help, not the black sheep, not the Whitmore embarrassment, but Sam Rivera. The woman who built a legacy. The woman who wasn't invited to the reunion because she was already hosting it. As I looked out at the twinkling lights of Boston and the ballroom's glowing sign below, a deep, quiet peace filled my chest. Tomorrow would start another chapter in the Whitmore story. But this time, it wouldn't be about privilege or appearances. It would be about hard work, about growth, about building something real. Because in the end, the best venues don't just offer a ballroom or a hotel room. They create something unforgettable. And tonight, I made sure my family would remember. Sometimes the world won't notice you until you build something so powerful they can't ignore it. And that's okay. Let them doubt. Let them laugh. Let them leave you out. Use it all as fuel. You don't need revenge. You need results. And when your moment comes, when they step into a room you built, smile. Not because you beat them, but because you never needed their approval to shine. Keep building. Keep dreaming. And when you rise, remember that the sweetest victory is living your truth. They labeled me the biggest disappointment in our family for 15 long years. Then one day, they climbed aboard my private airplane and discovered I was worth billions. Hit that subscribe button for more incredible stories about people who were written off but came back stronger than ever. The fancy invitation to our yearly family gathering sat there untouched on my kitchen counter. The expensive marble surface reflected the morning sun streaming through my floor-to-ceiling windows. After a decade and a half of staying away and keeping my distance, everything was about to change. And honestly, I wasn't planning for it to happen this way. I picked up my phone and read the news headline that would flip my world upside down. Forbes magazine had just named me one of their top young entrepreneurs. My virtual art business was now valued at over $4 billion. The story would go live tomorrow, just 2 days before our family meetup. So much for staying invisible. My assistant's voice came through the speaker system. Your brother Marcus is calling again. Of course he was. He'd been trying to reach me ever since the media announcement went out earlier. I answered the phone with a heavy sigh. Hey Marcus, what's going on? What the hell is happening here? He shouted. I just got a call from a major news network. They wanted to know how it feels to have a billionaire sister. Want to fill me in on something? I looked out at the desert landscape from my luxury apartment in Arizona. I guess you'll learn everything with the rest of the family. Stop playing games, his voice got sharper. You let us think you were broke for years. Mom was worried sick about you, thinking you were sleeping on people's couches. Were they really worried? I almost started laughing. You mean all those lectures about how I was wasting my life? The constant jokes. The helpful advice to go work for Uncle Pete's insurance company. They were just trying to help you out. No, they were trying to change me into something I'm not. I paused, thinking about Marcus. He was always the golden boy. Got his business degree from Harvard, joined Dad's accounting company right after college, never questioned anything. How long has this been going on? He finally asked. I walked out to my balcony and watched one of my 3 electric cars pull into the driveway below. Remember when I moved into that tiny apartment near the college? Marcus went quiet for a moment. Yeah, when you started doing that computer art stuff. That was 15 years ago. He didn't say anything else, and he didn't need to. That's right, I said out loud, smiling to myself. Everyone thought I had lost my mind for throwing away my finance degree to mess around with digital graphics, as Dad used to put it. But what none of you knew was that I had already sold my first virtual reality art collection for $600,000. $600,000. Marcus sounded shocked. Back then? Yep. And 6 months later, I sold another batch for $200,000. By the time Dad was announcing at Christmas dinner that I was still trying to figure out my life, I had already made my first million. I could picture Marcus now, squinting his eyes and trying to do the math in his head. But you still borrowed money from Mom and Dad for rent. You drove that beat-up old car until just last year. I actually laughed out loud. I never borrowed money, Marcus. I asked them to invest in my business. They said no, loudly. And that old car. That was a choice, just like this penthouse and the private jet parked at the airport downtown. Private jet? He whispered, his voice cracking. How wealthy are you exactly? I could hear the disbelief breaking through his usually calm tone. I thought back to all those family dinners where I was the invisible one. The sweet but struggling sister. Our youngest sister Emma used to dramatically pay for everyone's meals, sighing about how hard things must be for me. Forbes will say 7.2 billion, I said casually. But that's being modest. The real number is closer to 10. The sound Marcus made was somewhere between a gasp and a small scream. I've got to jump into a board meeting, I added like it was no big deal. See you at the family gathering. Click. I turned toward the intercom. Sarah, is everything ready? Yes, Miss Johnson, she replied. The jet is fueled up. The luxury car service is scheduled to pick up each family member. The venue has been secured. Private island confirmed, and all the legal agreements are signed. Perfect. I picked up the reunion invitation again. For 15 years, I'd let them put me in a box. The weird one. The dreamer. The financial disappointment. But this time they'd see who I really was. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma, OMG, is this Forbes thing real? Please tell me it's a joke. What's going on? I smiled and didn't reply. Funny how the quiet ones always surprise everyone. Emma, who loved to brag about how she was killing it in corporate America while her artsy older sister was still finding herself. The intercom buzzed again. Miss Johnson, both your parents are on the line. I didn't hesitate. Tell them I'm in a meeting. I glanced at my expensive watch. And Sarah, call the helicopter service. I think I'll take the chopper to my board meeting today. As I gathered my things, tablet, sunglasses, notes for my next business presentation, my mind went back to the day everything changed. The day I decided to keep my success a secret. 15 years earlier, Dad had rolled his eyes across the dinner table. 3D design isn't real art, Sophie. And this crypto art thing, he added, narrowing his eyes, it's a scam. No one with any sense is going to pay for computer-generated nonsense. I was 22, fresh out of college, sitting at Sunday dinner in my parents' Phoenix home. I was trying to explain a vision they didn't want to understand. They hadn't paid for an expensive education so I could play with pixels. Actually, Dad, I just sold my first collection for enough to. He cut me off. You either come work at the firm like we planned, or you're on your own. No support, no safety net, just a clean break. My mother gave me her trademark condescending smile, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Honey, we're just worried. You need structure. Something stable. A real career. I looked around the table. Dad's stern look, Mom's polite pity, Marcus's silence, and Emma's smirk. That was the moment. I didn't tell them about the $50,000 I'd already made, or the 3 major galleries trying to work with me, or the investment firms emailing me every day. You're right, I said, standing up. I'll figure it out on my own. 2 weeks later, I moved into a tiny studio apartment. They thought I was broke, too stubborn to ask for help. But I was quietly building a digital empire. Year 1 was brutal. 18-hour days, coding, creating art, networking. Sleepless nights fueled by pure ambition. My first major collection, called Neon Dreams, sold out in 6 hours. Total earnings, $1.2 million. I put every cent back into the business. Hired engineers, built platforms, revolutionized what digital ownership meant. But every time I visited home, same old car, faded jeans, quiet smile. "Let me help with rent," Mom would say. "No thanks," I'd reply. "I'm doing just fine." And I was more than fine. By the end of that first year, my net worth had crossed 10 million. By year 3, I'd quietly passed 100 million. But to my family, I was still just Sophie, the idealistic sister who wasted her potential. Now, 15 years later, as I stepped into my private helicopter on the roof of my building, I thought about how the little white lie had grown into a billion-dollar secret. And in 2 days, everything would change. My phone buzzed again. A text from Dad, "We need to talk." I smirked and turned off the phone. He'd have to wait. After 15 years of condescending comments and fake concern, they were finally about to learn the truth. And I was going to make sure they never forgot it. The Forbes article went live at exactly 6 in the morning. I was already awake, black coffee in hand, laptop open in my sleek home office. A wall of monitors lit up with chaos in real time. Digital art revolutionary, how Sophie Martinez quietly built a $10 billion empire. Right under the headline was a photo I personally approved. Me standing in front of my best-selling VR gallery, wearing a custom designer outfit worth more than Emma's entire yearly salary. The article didn't just reveal my wealth. It mapped out the empire I'd built in silence. The technology platforms, the partnerships, the auctions, the investors. My phone exploded. "Emma, wait, is this real? 10 billion. Marcus, I told you something was up yesterday." "Mom, Sophie, sweetheart, please call me." "Dad, this has to be a mistake. A misprint." I muted the group chat and checked my email. Dozens of interview requests, investment opportunities, speaking invitations. But one email caught my attention. It was from my dad's longtime business partner, Robert Chen. "Sophie, I believe there may be strategic value in exploring partnerships between Martinez Interactive and Chen Capital. I understand your father may have had past concerns, but I assure you, we're open to evolving." I actually laughed out loud. 3 years ago, I pitched them a collaboration. Robert looked me dead in the eye and said, "We don't gamble on internet gimmicks." My intercom buzzed. "Miss Martinez, your mother is in the lobby. She's quite insistent." I pulled up the security camera feed. There she was, Patricia Martinez, looking perfect as always in her tailored designer suit, arguing with security like her life depended on it. "Let her up," I sighed. Time to face the first wave of the storm. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into my penthouse overlooking the Arizona mountains. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, illuminating an original painting behind me worth more than my parents' entire house. "Sophie," my mother whispered, her voice shaking as she took in the space. "What is all this?" "This is my real home, Mom," I said calmly, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. "Not the modest little apartment I keep for family visits." She wandered toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, her heels echoing against the polished marble floors. "But how? When? How long have you been living like this?" 15 years, I replied, leaning against the kitchen island. "Since the night you and Dad said digital art was a phase. Something no one would ever take seriously." She turned slowly, her perfectly made-up face now clouded with confusion and something else I couldn't quite identify. "But we saw you struggling. The tiny apartment, that old car, asking for rent help." I gave a dry smile. "I never asked for rent help, Mom. I asked you both to invest in my company. There's a difference. And the apartment, the car. All part of the act. I played the role you believed. The broke dreamer, the lost one. That was the only version of me you ever wanted to see. Her lips parted in disbelief. You lied to us, Sophie. For 15 years. No, I said quietly. I just didn't correct the story you all chose to believe. You were so sure I was failing, you never looked deeper. She sank slowly into one of my custom leather chairs, her perfect posture collapsing. For the first time in years, she looked her age. Does anyone else know? Just Marcus, I said. He found out when the press release went out. I think he tried to warn you. She nodded. He called your father, said it must be a mistake. Some other Sophie Martinez. I walked to my desk and handed her a folder. Here's the proposal I gave Dad 3 years ago. If he'd invested the $1 million I asked for, his share would be worth over $100 million today. Her hands trembled as she held the folder. He said you were looking for charity, she whispered. That your art had failed. And you believed him. She didn't answer. Did any of you ever come to one of my exhibitions? Google my name. Nothing. I turned back to the window, watching the city buzz below. The family reunion is still happening, by the way. But I changed the location. I bought out the entire resort. Everyone will be picked up by luxury cars, flown on my jet, and will be celebrating on my private island. Your island? My mother echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. In the Caribbean, I said casually. I bought it last year after closing my first billion-dollar deal. I turned to face her fully. And Mom, this time I won't be the quiet one sitting through dinner while everyone lists their promotions and new house purchases. I've got some things to say too. She stood up slowly, smoothing her silk skirt with trembling hands. Your father, when he sees all of this, her voice faltered, he'll have no choice but to admit that his daughter, his artist daughter, built something bigger than anything in the Martinez legacy. I smiled gently. And Mom, that's just the beginning. I walked her to the elevator, pausing just before the doors opened. Oh, and one more thing. Remember that luxury car you've always wanted? The one Dad says is too expensive. She looked at me, puzzled. I bought 3 of them last month, I said with a shrug. Just because I could. The doors slid closed on her stunned expression. As soon as she was gone, I hit the intercom. Sarah, is everything in place for the reunion? Yes, Miss Martinez, she replied smoothly. Island staff are fully briefed. Each guest will receive a personalized folder documenting every investment offer they declined over the years, along with current valuations. The video timeline of your achievements is ready for the welcome dinner. Excellent. I picked up my phone, opened the family group chat, and typed a single message, looking forward to seeing everyone at the reunion. Dress appropriately for a private island. Transportation will be provided. Then I refreshed the stock dashboard on my laptop. My company's value had surged since the Forbes article hit. Another billion added to my net worth before sunrise. I thought of my father, probably in his office right now, trying to process how the daughter he dismissed had quietly become one of the wealthiest women in America. I thought of Emma, still bragging about her 6-figure salary and beach house, blissfully unaware I could buy her entire lifestyle with a week's interest. This reunion was going to be unforgettable. My phone buzzed again. A message from Dad, we need to talk before the reunion. Some things are better discussed privately. I typed back, everything will be discussed at the reunion, Dad. Isn't that what reunions are for? Sharing our accomplishments. Then I called Sarah once more. Have the design team repaint the helicopter landing pad. Make sure my name is clearly visible from the air. It's already done, Miss Martinez. Anything else? I paused, thinking of 15 years of pity, mockery, and being branded the family disappointment. Yes. Have the Forbes article framed and hung in every room on the island. I want it to be the first thing they see, no matter where they turn. As I ended the call, I caught my reflection in the glass. Calm, confident, wealthy beyond imagination. And finally ready to show them all who I really was. The countdown was over. The morning of our family reunion arrived clear and bright. I stood on the private runway watching as 3 black luxury cars pulled up one after another. They had arrived. The doors opened. First came my father, still upright, still sharp-eyed, but his confidence seemed dimmed. My mother followed, more subdued than usual after our conversation. Marcus, Emma, and a wave of aunts, uncles, and cousins trailed behind, their faces full of disbelief and barely hidden judgment. And there, waiting for them in the center of it all, sat my jet. Sleek, white, gleaming. Martinez Interactive written in brushed silver along the side. Welcome, everyone, I said, letting my voice carry. Hope the ride was comfortable. Sophie, my father said, stepping forward, trying to reclaim his usual authority. This is a bit much. The resort would have been just fine. I smiled. The resort was too public, Dad. This reunion needed to be more meaningful. On my island. You're what? Emma muttered, clutching her designer bag. Of course you have an island. As they boarded the jet, I watched their eyes shift, soaking in the gold-trimmed interior, the original artwork, the crystal glasses. Is that a real Picasso? Aunt Linda whispered. Yes, I replied. Picked it up last year. My father cleared his throat. Sophie, maybe we should talk. We will, I said. When we land. Until then, enjoy the champagne. It costs more than your company made last quarter. He flinched. Perfect. 2 hours later, we descended toward a glittering jewel in the ocean. My 300-acre private island, with a luxury resort nestled at its heart. Let the reunion begin. And there it was, visible from the sky, exactly as planned. My name, Sophie Martinez, spelled out in letters so large and bold they could practically be seen from space. What the? Emma gasped, misreading the name at first. Then her jaw dropped. As we landed, I heard her whisper, of course she branded the helicopter pad. Surrounding it were massive digital screens, each cycling through my most successful art collections. The sale prices were prominently displayed, 2.3 million, 6.7 million, 11.5 million. Each one a statement in itself. Welcome to Martinez Island, I said, stepping onto the ground. My own little slice of paradise. Little. Marcus muttered, eyes wide. The resort complex before them was a seamless blend of futuristic architecture and untouched Caribbean beauty. Everyone's rooms are ready, I continued. There's some reading material waiting in each suite. I suggest you review it before dinner. The reading material was customized. For Dad, a printed timeline of every deal he declined, each missed opportunity annotated with present-day valuations. For Emma, a comparison of her entire annual salary versus what I earn in interest per day. For Marcus, an analysis showing how much his firm lost by turning down a collaboration with my platform. I gave them an hour to settle in, then summoned them to the main dining hall. A glass-walled space overlooking turquoise waves. The long table sparkled with crystal, silver, and place settings worth more than most cars. And on every wall, the Forbes article, framed, backlit, impossible to ignore. They entered slowly, all pretense of confidence fading. Even their designer outfits looked oddly out of place here. "Please, have a seat," I said warmly. "We have quite a bit to talk about." "Sophie," Dad began, attempting diplomacy. "I think I speak for all of us when I say we're surprised." "Surprised?" I repeated with a soft laugh. "Not angry that I kept this from you. Not disappointed I didn't share the truth. Just surprised." "We didn't know," Mom murmured. "No, you didn't want to know," I corrected her. "Every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject. Every time I offered you a seat at the table, you dismissed me." "But the apartment," Emma said, voice small. "The car. The times I picked up the check because I thought. Because you thought I was broke," I finished for her. "Did you enjoy that, Emma? Being the successful sister? The savior?" She looked down, cheeks flushed. At least she had the decency to look ashamed. "Let me show you something," I said calmly, pressing a button on the side of the dining table. Motorized panels opened overhead, and high-resolution screens descended. A timeline appeared, juxtaposing milestones in my journey with the words they'd used to dismiss me. 2010, "This 3D art thing is a waste of your degree, Dad." Result, my first digital sculpture collection sells for $50,000. 2012, "Sophie, you need a stable career, Mom." Result, company valuation hits $15 million. 2015, "At least one of us is doing well, Emma." Result, I close a $120 million partnership with a major tech firm. 2018, "Crypto art sounds like a scam, Marcus." Result, my platform crosses 500,000 users and 600 million in sales. 2022, "We don't fund online gimmicks, Dad's firm." Result, company valuation surpasses $3 billion. Every single comment, every time you looked at me like I was chasing a fantasy, I said, my voice steady, I remembered all of it. And I used it. My father swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you never wanted to hear it," I said. "You needed to learn that success doesn't wear a suit. It doesn't follow your playbook. And sometimes the person you underestimate changes everything." I walked to the edge of the room, glass walls framing endless turquoise water. The hardest part wasn't keeping secrets. It was watching you all celebrate each other while I was building something you couldn't see. "Mediocrity," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Yes," I said. "You played it safe. That was your ceiling. Mine was higher." I turned to Emma. "You flaunted your six-figure salary like it was gold. I made that during a coffee break." Dad stood. "Enough. We were wrong, okay?" "No," I said firmly. "I don't want an apology. I want you to understand." I pressed another button. The screens shifted, revealing the prototype of my latest creation. This launches next month. A redefinition of how art is created, owned, and valued. Estimated worth, $10 billion. I looked at them all. This time, you'll see it happen with your own eyes. No more doubting. The room fell into deep silence. The kind that only comes when illusions finally collapse. My family sat frozen, absorbing the reality they had ignored for so long. Finally, my mother spoke. "We're proud of you, Sophie. We should have been proud all along." "Thank you, Mom," I said gently. "But I didn't do this for your pride. I did it because it was my dream, my vision." I looked around at the luxury they now couldn't deny. And now it's my empire. So what happens now? Marcus asked quietly. Now? I echoed, pouring myself a glass of wine. Now we have dinner as a family. But this time, we'll do it my way. No more pretending. No more hiding. I raised my glass. To the truth. Finally. One by one, they lifted their glasses. The shock hadn't fully worn off, but something was shifting. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of world-class cuisine, aged wine, and hesitant but warming conversation. For the first time in 15 years, they weren't just seeing me. They were really seeing me. When they finally retired to their suites, I stayed behind, watching moonlight dance across the waves. Sarah appeared beside me, her voice soft. Was it worth it? I thought back to the timeline, their stunned expressions, the pride they never used to show. Yes, I said. But not for the reasons I thought. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about finally being free. Fully myself. I smiled. And tomorrow, we show them the future. Their world of mutual funds, corporate ladders, and conservative choices is fading. The world I've built, interactive, immersive, transformative, is just beginning. Later that night, I found a note slipped under my door. My father's handwriting, I was wrong. Not just about your business. About everything. You didn't just succeed. You changed the game. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Dad. I placed it in a frame beside the receipt from my first digital sale. $50,000. A reminder of where it all began. The next morning, as my family gathered for breakfast, attitudes softened, curiosity blooming, I realized something profound. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't loud. It's in quietly knowing you built something extraordinary while the world was busy doubting you. My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. Martinez Interactive announces revolutionary new platform. The future had arrived. And this time, they'd be watching it unfold. No more hiding. No more pretending. Just success, on my terms. If you've heard my story, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would do if you were in my shoes. Would you keep going even when your family didn't believe in you? Would you stay silent or make the world listen when the time was right? Your support means more than you think. Share this video if you believe in second chances, in building something powerful even when no one is watching. And don't forget to subscribe, because this isn't just my story. It's for anyone who's ever been doubted, dismissed, or underestimated. And if you're chasing a dream right now, keep going. People may laugh. They may doubt you. They may call you crazy. Let them. Let their doubts fuel your drive. Build quietly, grow steadily, and when the time comes, let the results speak for themselves. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your vision. But someday, you owe it to yourself to prove you were right all along. Because success isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about being undeniable. Now tell me below, what dream are you unwilling to let go of?